It's gaming time. We're here to talk about Guild Wars 2. Okay, that's what we're here for, gamers. It's time. We've got a fresh perspective, and that's why we brought in this guy. Okay, we brought in ReelyReed all the way from other MMOs, other games. You know, the green grass of WoW and Final Fantasy.
It's been a very
Give it a rating out of 10. Your experience so far. And this is overall, like all the good, all the bad, the net overall rating of your experience out of 10. What do you think you'd give the game so far?
Like, as you move through the game as a new player, you're gonna go, huh, that's interesting. Like, it's a completely abandoned system. Oh, look, it's the system that replaced that completely abandoned system. Oh, that system got abandoned. Look, it's been replaced by another system after that.
MOCM, for example, that was a really fun fight to figure out.
Yeah.
Because when we were going in blind, we were like, oh, are they like, okay, so these are all chess pieces, obviously. When they get to the end, are they turning into a queen? And thusly, like, everything that, like, they hit, like, is turning into those red spaces. Like, oh, okay, no, it's like, actually, they're just walking over them. So we need to prevent them from getting over to the other side for sure. Maybe we can let in one at a time.
And you look outside, and your friend is being consumed by an anaconda. Do you open the door?
Sneb's in the mix.
Good.
It's gaming time. We're here to talk about Guild Wars 2. Okay, that's what we're here for, gamers. It's time. We've got a fresh perspective, you know? Things are a little unhinged right now in the Guild Wars 2 community. You know, me and Sneb, we wanted an oasis. We wanted an escape, if you will. And that's why we brought in this guy, okay? We brought in ReelyReed all the way from other MMOs, other games. You know, the green grass of WoW and Final Fantasy. And he's here to tell us how good we've got it. Okay, that's right, guys. It's Guild Wars 2 shill TeaTime. No, okay, it's not. I'm kidding. But hey, welcome to the show, man. We're going to talk about Sneb, and we've got Sneb as well. Okay, we've got Sneb also joining us. Here he is, big man Sneb, marathon runner Sneb. Let's go. Let's juice up. Let's talk about some content. And just to get into it, Sneb, he's in charge of this TeaTime. I'm just going to say this. Like, he has the plan. He knows what we're talking about. He knows what's going on. Yeah, he's the expert. And I guess I'll let you open. Where do you want to go with this, man? What do you want to talk about? Because we're going to chat about Guild Wars 2 today. We know we're not going to be super directed. We're just going to talk. This could go anywhere. It's a surprise TeaTime. It can get out of hand. It can get out of control.
Let me
tell you that.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing that we do to begin is to initiate ReelyReed by asking a few very particular and important questions.
Okay.
Of course.
To start us off, I need you to envision that you have a friend. Let's say that this is a friend that you may have done a podcast with before. Like, you're pretty good friends, you know. And this friend is in trouble. You know, they're having some problems. And they come to your house and they knock on the door. And you look outside and your friend is being consumed by an anaconda. Do you open the door?
Yeah, I mean, it's just one anaconda. Right?
So you're telling me that you would open the door to save your friend?
Is this a trick question? Yeah, obviously. It's just one anaconda.
Yeah, you see, I think that most normal people would try to save their friend, but it just so happens that some people would not open the door. And
what is this
instead, they would go
to?
these nightly journeys where there's just some random old guy that is like completely nude or something, and they just would talk to them like it's completely normal. But they would definitely not open the door for their friend being consumed by the anaconda.
See, this is what happens when people complain about the new Fractal too much. Like, Sneb completely loses his mind. Right? He's lost it. He's insane. No, he's referencing a slightly unusual stream where me and Sneb, we were exchanging some kind of wide, you know, the kind of wild theoretical hypothetical scenarios, and also, I guess, telling some stories. One of which was like, you know, would you? And by the way, to be clear, I'm talking, you know, I said I would not save Sneb if he was like 90% enveloped by the anaconda, because there's like clearly no hope. It's over. You know, the snake has just eaten him, right? Like, the snake has just crushed him and is eating him. I'm just, you know, you can stay outside, you know, I'm not letting the snake in. Yeah.
I guess anacondas would crush you, right?
Yeah. That's how it would get you. It'd crush
it's
you
not
and
like
then eat
digestive,
you.
right?
Well, no, it's not yet.
Yeah, it's still savable.
I have enough to knock on the door, but then Teapot would not answer. He would
Yeah,
look
you
up and
can
be like,
knock on the
"Nope."
door. You can still play games, bro.
Well, yeah, I
Like, that's
guess.
fucked up.
From the snake,
Or-
reaching
oh,
out
no,
of
fucking
the
curse.
reaching out of the snake and like tapping on the keyboard, like while being eaten by the snake.
Yeah, dude. I mean, like, at the end of the day, it's at your house. So, like, you're in your element. You can get a broom, you can get a knife. Obviously, like, killing an animal, it's a little bit fucked up, but, like, you can save your friend, which is huge. By the way, because I, like, kind of, like, I do curse a little bit whenever I'm off my, just, like, thinking off the top of my noggin.
Yeah.
Is it okay to curse on the podcast?
No, this is a very family friendly. You know, of course, yeah, you're fine.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I'll keep it to a minimum, though. Just for that YouTube, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, not saving your friend, Teapot, that's crazy. You're in your element. Like, are you just like busy, dude? You got like
Yeah, like
I
I'm
don't
grinding,
know,
man.
issues
I'm
going on?
blasting.
Yeah.
I've got like the speed run
can't
going
be
on,
bothered.
right? You know, I'm working on stuff. Like he's staying outside, right? The snake is
He can't be bothered.
yeah, I
It's
can't
only
be
got
bothered.
one hand. It's not really worth it.
It's not, yeah.
It's probably gonna feed in your HCCM groups in the future.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. This Sneb guy, like, I'm glad he plays on NA because I wouldn't want him on the EU LFG. He'd be a menace, right? He'd be a complete menace.
Yeah.
Right? He is a menace. All Sneb does on EU LFG is he just advertises, man. Seriously, that's all he's doing.
Oh yeah.
I flamed him a couple of times. I made a couple of, don't tell him this, you know, but I made a couple of alt accounts and like flamed him out, like for even posting in the LFG. Seriously. You just see his face. He doesn't like it, right? I just say, Sneb, how dare you? How dare you do this?
Did you see my tweet? The guy that just like went completely off the rails on me.
Okay,
Wait,
dude.
what?
Yeah.
Wait. I think I did actually see this.
I actually didn't show the full conversation either. This guy flames me out a little bit, immediately blocks me. So I messaged him on my other account, and I was like, "Dude, if you're gonna do that, at least have the guts to let me respond back. I mean, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
And then he just said no. And then we went back and forth a little bit.
Yeah.
And I said, "Why are you so mad about this?"
No.
Well, because there's a guild recruitment thing on the LFG, and I said, "Yeah." I said, "Put yourself in there right now, and let me show you what happens." And they said no, and I said, "Well, I'll tell you what happens then. You can easily remove them immediately because it's not a squad." Yeah. But anyway, we went back and forth, and it was people have nothing better to
Can you
complain
troll
about.
people on the guild recruitment one very easily?
Oh yeah, it's very easy to do. Yeah. And you also can't set squad messages. You can only have parties there. So the guild recruitment area is completely not fit for purpose. It is essentially useless.
It does nothing.
Yeah, it does not function.
If I were to put something in there right now, somebody could immediately join and remove it.
That's crazy.
The
Sometimes
grouping. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Sometimes you hear things from like these game devs. Like I get that there's like a lot of like spaghetti code and like that and all kinds of MMOs and whatnot. But like this just reminds me of like, did you guys see in Diablo 4 that you can't have more storage for all your items and things like that? More tabs because you load in every single character and all of their wardrobe, all of their items, and all of their tabs, all the storage tabs.
Huh.
Whenever you're in the open world. It's like
so it just lag the game basically. It would just completely break the game if they did that. Yeah.
That's why they gotta wait for season 2.
Yeah, sometimes it's the game is a noodle. And Guild Wars 2 has got 10 years of spaghetti. There's definitely a lot of stuff like that. In the game that just has been left and completely abandoned. I mean, it's obviously like broadly speaking, it's like true of a lot of games, but I think Guild Wars 2 definitely more than most, right? Like I think it's fascinating actually, and this is something we're going to talk about today, right? As a somewhat new player, right? I think you've been playing for like 3 months or so. I think you said
3 months and 1 week, I think.
Yeah, like as you move through the game as a new player, you're gonna go, huh? That's interesting. Like, it's a completely abandoned system. Oh, look, it's the system that replaced that completely abandoned system. Oh, that system got abandoned. Look, it's been replaced by another system after that. And you kind of have this experience, like, while you're working through the game, that you kind of walk past, like, the gravestones of every different, attempt at a feature as you go through, right? You see all these legacy features and stuff like that. That's definitely the Guild Wars 2 experience in a nutshell, for sure. But kind of on that note, oh yeah, go ahead.
I fear that me being on this podcast is going to be kind of like whataboutisms, because it's like,
oh dear,
I remember when I first played WoW and it was the exact same experience.
Yeah,
because they didn't yet do like their scaling and their leveling. So like when you were leveling
you had to play the entire game, right?
Yeah, and the entire game was basically let me go through, do
Yeah.
like 8 dungeons, and then I'm like out of
Yeah.
that level bracket, and then it's like it's like the weird little funky one where you're okay, now you got wand where you're supposed to like go through and like you're supposed to speed run all the leveling here by doing treasure chests. Now you're into Legion. Legion's a little bit weird because you got your legendary or you got your artifact system that you kind of have to put points into, but actually it doesn't work anymore because relics are no longer a thing. But then finally you're in BFA, and in BFA it just slows down to a halt, and that's great because now you got the Azurite powers.
Which is that's fun. You know, that's good content.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely true of a lot of MMOs. I think it's honestly a miracle that anyone makes it, isn't it? Right? You know, like I hear all these like horror stories about in Final Fantasy you've got to play through the entire story and it's going to take you like 50 hours to do it to actually get to the latest content in the game, right? You know, in WoW, in WoW. Well, I think they've kind of streamlined it in WoW a fair bit now. To be honest, like they have like you can kind of get to the end game relatively quickly, but it's still like a good chunk of hours to actually make it. In Guild Wars 2, you've got to play through like the core game, which is totally different to Heart of Thorns, which is totally different to like Path of Fire, which is then totally different again to the living story content and so on. It's a miracle anyone makes it. You know, like
guaranteed, guaranteed. Guild Wars 2 is the strangest experience and how much it shifts, right? Because Heart of Thorns is so totally different from Path of Fire, and Path of Fire has been so totally different from like everything else except for Living World Season 4, which is a lot like Path of Fire, and then IBS was something, right?
Yeah.
That was very much something.
It's a
Grothmar
thing.
was sick. Yeah. Really like Grothmar Valley. And then EOD, I'm on the camp of I think EOD was sick.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm an Ender Dragons enjoyer.
Yeah.
Actually, overall, I think it was cool. I'm definitely into that. For sure, it was a very solid experience. Maybe not quite as polished as some of the other expansions. It's a bit. They really were like, okay, we're getting it out the door, right? You know, we got to ship this expansion. But I think in terms of content, I think they hit some pretty good notes there for sure. Very interested to see actually, and this is something that we're going to be talking about a little bit. I think is kind of the nature of instance content in Guild Wars 2. Again,
I kind of want to start out by
oh, yeah?
just asking what inspired you to even get into Guild Wars 2 to begin with. Like, how did you find
ArenaNet
the
partner
game?
Sneb. ArenaNet partner Sneb. Why did you even think about playing the game? That's a quote, guys. Okay, why would you even bother?
There's a reason I'm asking this question. Everybody critiques the marketing of Guild Wars 2 all the time, and so I'm always curious how people find out about the game because that's marketing.
I think that's a really good question. I think it's a really good question. You guys want the long one or the short answer?
I want the long one.
Okay. Short answer, preach, obviously, right? Long answer is okay. Way back in the day, the only thing I heard about Guild Wars 2 was something like the community backlash against like the writing team, and I was like, okay. And I scrolled past it on my MMO Twitter, right?
Wait, are you talking about like the Jessica Price thing, the Doroya thing?
Yeah, 100%.
Maybe. I don't know. I put no thought into it. I thought Guild Wars 2 was a dead game, like back in like 2018. And I scrolled through on my Twitter, and I was just like, oh, that's still around, I guess.
That did happen.
And then what was it? End of Dragon came out. That's the next time I heard about it because I heard about HECM. Someone in the World First team, I can't remember who it was, went in on a podcast with Liquid Maximum from World of Warcraft, who was also playing a lot of Final Fantasy at the time. And they were just talking about the new design of HECM and how it kind of is similar to a lot of the design in Final Fantasy.
Wait, pause. Was that not Teapot?
It was me.
Was it Teapot?
Yeah.
Yes. I was like,
wait, Teapot, was that you?
It was me, yeah.
Oh, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah.
My buddy go through all the little cards trying to find out who that might be. And I was like, I don't think anyone but Teapot talked to Max.
Oh, wow, the vapors. I didn't know I was in the room with such a celebrity.
Yeah.
Everybody deep breaths now. Everybody calm down.
You got me into the game, Teapot. Congrats, bro.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome.
Hey.
That's why I am the marketing team. Okay, I am Guild Wars 2 marketing team. Talk to Max, talk to Preach. Okay, we're doing stuff.
You were the first positive press I heard on Guild Wars 2. You were the first time I heard about Guild Wars 2, and I was like, oh wow, maybe I'll give that a try. And then The third thing that reminded me of Guild Wars 2 was whenever Dragonflight came out.
Mm.
Dragonflight came out, it had the dragon flying. Everyone was like, oh, there's just like Guild Wars 2. And I had a couple people in my D&D group who
Oh,
played
yeah.
Guild Wars 2 for years, and they're like, oh yeah, this looks just
Mm.
like Skyscale or Griffin. I'm
Mm.
like, all right, sure. Well, it looks cool because it's in WoW. And then now I'm here because I saw Preach was playing. I was like, I'll give it a go. I'll give it a try.
Mhm.
Play with some of my friends from D&D. We started blind raiding, started streaming it a little bit, and you know what? I've had a good time.
Mm.
It's been a
Give it
very
a rating
positive
out of
experience.
10. Your experience so far. And this is overall, like all the good, all the bad, the net overall rating of your experience out of 10. What do you think you'd give the game so far?
On the game or rating? I thought I heard
the
rating.
the net total of everything combined, the game in general.
I think overall, I would give the game about the same marks I would give to like World of Warcraft or to Final Fantasy. There are obvious drawbacks to it, but I do think all three MMOs that I'm kind of consistently playing do compete with each other on similar levels. And in Guild Wars, it's definitely not the rating keeping me into it. It's definitely like the world. A lot of the community actually is kind of very fun to kind of interact with. One of my good friends from D&D, her name's Corinne. She actually was telling me about how she was getting one of her legendary trinkets that like comes from Draconis Mons, and how everyone hates being in Draconis Mons, but they have a great time being there together because everyone's just complaining in map chat. I'm like, wow, that sounds lovely. I haven't experienced that since like Baron's chat in World of Warcraft, right? Like the last time I was doing like open world content in World of Warcraft was 9.1 or 10.1, I can't remember what it was, where we went to Korthas or something like that. It was really, really lame. And like you could grief the shit out of people, and it was just not a very good time. And then I come to Guild Wars 2 and a lot of the world content, you know, it may not be the hardest thing in the world, but I'm not looking strictly for difficulty. I'm just kind of like here for a good time. I go out into the wild of Jai High Bluffs. I see a giant dragon. I'm like, neat. That's pretty sick. So I think overall, I'd give it about like a 7.5, 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you bring up that kind of MMO element, because certainly I've found that the massively multiplayer element has been lost in a lot of modern MMOs, right? They end up as kind of instant simulators and on almost like very solo-oriented games that kind of just have people around you at the same time. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. But I think Guild Wars 2 really does deliver on that massive experience, both from the PvP and the PvE perspective, right? Because you have the open world stuff, which ultimately, if I was going to sell Guild Wars 2, if I put my salesman hat on, right, I'm like, hey, referral link time. I'm probably not going to talk about. I'm not going to lead with raids. I'm not going to lead with strike missions. I'm going to lead with open world and world versus world. Like that's where that's where I'm going to actually say, yeah, this is why you got to play this game. I'm going to show people Dragon's End, right? Like, spoiler alert, I'm going to show people Dragons. I'm going to show people Dragon's Stand, right? I'm going to show people the Chat Garant, right? Like, that's where I'm going to go with the game. And ultimately, from that other perspective, kind of the PvP perspective, because there's obviously lots of players who are interested in that element of an MMO or just of gaming in general, I'm going to show them world versus world. Because I think that there aren't that many things that can match that in terms of the scale of it, right? Like New World was kind of going in that direction, then they changed their mind. And there, I think ESO has some kind of stuff going on there, right? With some world PvP stuff, like BDO as well. It's got a little bit of that. But I think World versus World really does kind of stand the test of time, actually, for that massive PvP experience. And it's that massiveness that I would really highlight in the game, right? As that could be very interesting to other players who maybe are looking to play an MMO or played other MMOs. Funny enough, I think kind of Preach identified this as well, right? Is that the spectacle is what Guild Wars 2 does very well, like these big, massive things. And that's not to say, by the way, guys, I just don't get overexcited. I'm not saying like, oh yeah, the raids in this game are trash. They're not trash, right? And the instance content is perfectly good. It's not perfect, right? There's definitely some spicy stuff with some of the latest additions to the game, but overall, it's good. But I think there's definitely some like very clear strengths of the game where is much more competitive and stands out relative to the other products on the market compared to other things. Like, you know, WoW's got raids, Final Fantasy has raids, but they haven't really got that world PvP experience, and they haven't really got that open world experience in the same way that Guild Wars 2 has, right?
So, Teapot, you've been playing Dragonflight.
Yeah.
Have you been doing any world view or not world, sorry, like world PvP in WoW?
World
Is that at all
PvP,
part of the game?
honestly, no. Like, I did some leveling stuff, and I had war mode on, and I just encountered like nobody.
Yeah.
Because to clarify, there's kind of like opt-in PvP, right?
You're
in
playing
WoW,
on Terran Mill, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And you get like extra XP and stuff, but I feel like nobody does it.
Nope. See, most of my World v World experience was playing on Alliance. So I would go into like World PvP in that game, and I would just get stomped, and I'd be like, well,
yep, fun.
off.
Yep.
Just like, you know, those Zergs in World v World was like the Horde, and then you're just like that one, maybe two guys, maybe got a little boomkin friend over on the side who's like picking up flowers because he's just in his travel mode, and then here you are just facing the Horde, the literal horde of players coming at you. And I haven't had a great World v World experience quite yet in Guild Wars 2 because I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm not really guided that much other than with getting the Warclaw. And then I got the Warclaw and I was like, I don't know, roam around, I guess.
Yeah. I think you've brought up something that's very intriguing. I think World versus World is one of the most difficult game modes to break into. And the reason is because there's a lot of unwritten rules and sort of unofficial ways to play the game mode. You would think that, actually, I'll just ask you, I'm not going to assume. When you open the World versus World UI and you see all of these points and you see that teams are ahead or below or whatever, what do you think? Like, what is your initial reaction to that?
I look at all those points and all these maps and I say, where can I go fight people? Like,
yes.
What is this about? I don't care about points. I don't care about the rewards, honestly, for myself. I just want to have a fun gaming experience. And I would have people coming into my chat when I was first getting into Guild Wars 2 a lot. So like, Reedy, should really go into World v World. I'm getting all these chests, all these heavy bags of stuff. And I'm like, okay. I'm not really a gold per minute gamer. I just want to do stuff that feels novel and feels cool, and it's like something that I can't really experience in other MMOs. And going on top of that, just a little bit back, I mentioned that Preach kind of got me into the game because I saw him fighting Zera, and I was like, wow, you're gliding between the platforms. You have the two squads split up. That looks interesting. And I was asking in chat back in those days, and I was like saying like, hey, is this on normal mode or is this like on a hard mode or something like that? And like, everyone's like, oh, there's a normal mode. I was like, oh, wow, this looks kind of difficult for a normal mode. Didn't know it was the only mode. So it's a fight that desperately needs a CM. But yeah, Zera was a very, very spectacular fight. And that's something that you don't typically see in a game like WoW, but it is something you see in Final Fantasy quite a bit.
Yeah.
And the movement in Guild Wars 2 is spades beyond Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy has very, very good fight structure. But the movement is god awful.
Just to go back quickly, I think you brought up something that's super important, which is you look at all of these points and you're like, to hell with that. I don't know what any of them mean. I'm just going to go fight people. Well, it turns out that's how most people feel.
Yeah.
So in World versus World, despite there being all these objectives and all of these points, and I also want to preface that I am not the World versus World main player, so sometimes people get upset when I talk about this. I'm just speaking from my personal experience here. You see all of those things, but they don't really matter that much. They're mostly a way to draw people to a place so that you can have that fight. And so what you find in World versus World is that people have set up all kinds of unofficial game modes like Guild versus Guild, or they basically contact other guilds, and there's like very particular meeting places where guilds just go and basically run into each other, or big blobs of people. You don't even have to be in a guild.
Cool.
And so people go for the fights. They just want to perhaps maneuver around objectives, but when at the end of the day, people don't care that much about winning the matchup. You know, very few do anyway. And the reason for that is quite simple. There's no reason that you would. It's not like you're going to win anything extra, right? Or if there is any benefit, it's completely inconsequential. So World versus World is very intimidating because it's very community driven. And the only way that you're going to have a really good experience is if you kind of break in there. And so unless you're very social and unless you're really advocating for yourself and really looking for these communities, it just seems like you're just not in the loop. You know, you show up and maybe there's something going on, but you don't know what it is and you don't know where it is. And a lot of the tags go private so that people randomly won't join them to experience the fight, which completely understandable, but it does confuse new players to the game mode, I think.
The first day I went into World v. World by myself, I saw a private tag and I was like, why can't I join them? And people in my chat was like, they're just cringe. They're just cringe. I'm like, all right. I just whispered them and said, hey, can I join? They said, sure.
Wow.
So like, I don't personally understand World v. World yet. I do want to give it more time in the future. But dude, I do feel like hopefully something like an SOTO, when it brings out that kind of battle pass like system, that's something that they can look at and like apply over World v. World. Obviously, they already have the reward structuring with those things that are in PvP as well. But hopefully that's something that they can kind of like draw people in, give them a bit more of a guide, get them kind of going the right way, and that way they can like figure out where the enjoyment is in World v. World.
Have you heard about alliances at all?
Yeah, I mean, alliances probably will. World vs. World is due a facelift. It's probably going to get that actually. I almost want to tell. Yeah. I want to let Sneb tell the story of alliances actually because it's kind of funny. And I'll actually set this down. I'm going to let Sneb kind of unleash it, just go completely unchained. But I've got to very quickly check something. Okay, so alliances. I'm not even going to say what they are. I'll let Sneb handle that. Alliances. Let me. New World vs. World update announced 1,998 days ago. Sneb, go. That's all he knows. Yeah, that's all he knows right now. And now we're gonna
1,900 plus. Has it been that long?
Yeah, oh, 2,000 days coming up in 2 days from now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. Have you heard anything about alliances yet?
So very clearly there was a beta going on, and I had someone in my community that asked me to come along. His name's Hilt, and he runs his own guild. And so I signed up for this alliance. I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, we'll do this. It's like a bunch of guilds getting together. Awesome. I went in day one, and like we went in a reset, right? And I was loading up, and then we kind of just like went to our first fort, and then we got rolled over. And I was kind of like, is this it? And they're like, oh, okay. Now we're gonna go over here and do this and do that. I'm like, so we're not gonna go fight anyone? We're just gonna get rolled over by a Zerg? And I was just like, I kind of fell off very quickly.
This is World versus World for you. If the Zerg is better than you, you will get rolled. That's kind of how it goes. But I'll try to explain. Again, I'm not a Guild Wars 2 historian for World versus World, so I may not have all the details. So TeaPot can fill in the gaps.
More than I do. Yeah.
A long time ago in a Tyria far, far away, there was an announcement made that said, we will bring alliances to Guild Wars 2. Now, there's some history here because in Guild Wars 1, you had alliances, and these alliances allowed you to have a guild, and then you could ally with 9 other guilds, and then you'd have like an alliance chat, and you could talk to other people in other guilds, and they had different objectives. For example, you could own a city by doing faction war. It was more of a PvE thing, really. But they thought, okay, well, we'll make it so that rather than it being server-based in Guild Wars 2 for World versus World, because right now if you join a server, that's who you play with, right? And sometimes there are linked servers. But rather than doing that, what if we make this guild-focused and alliance-focused? So you pair up in your guild, you represent a guild, and you pair up with other guilds, and then you go in, and that's who you're playing with. So rather than having all this confusion about who's on what server and having to pay money to get gems, to transfer servers and all of that, it would just be very simple. You play with your friends. Everyone was really excited about this idea when it first came out in particular. And this excitement continued for quite a while until, this is where things get a little bit fuzzy for me. But it kind of just stopped, was my understanding. They just stopped talking about it. And the people kept asking, when is the next update on Alliance? And then they just never said anything about it, right? They just, years go by. And then all of a sudden, with Icebrood Saga, they did an Icebrood Saga announcement. They like hyped this up. People went to, I think it was at PAX, right? They had a big theater. People waited in line. People flew out specifically for this announcement. And in the announcement, they said, oh yeah, and we're bringing out alliances, right? And so they re-announced alliances again. And everyone was like, oh yeah, alliances, yeah, right. It's actually going to happen this time. And then they never talked about it again. They just went completely silent on it again and just stopped working on it. And then later, like, and keep in mind, this is the span of years that this has been going on. We find out that they had announced this multiple times and then just stopped working on it. And so they announced it again. They said, okay, now we're going to do alliances for real. Before, we had just stopped working on it, completely paused development. Sorry we didn't say anything, by the way, but like, it's for real this time. And that was like, what, 2 years ago now? Year and a half ago?
It was a long time ago.
And so to
copium.
be charitable, they have done a bunch of betas and there has been progress. But the reason Teapot wants me to say this is because every time they've announced alliances, I've gotten a little bit excited. Not because I'm a huge World versus World player, but because I just think it would be cool to be able to play World versus World with my friends. I'm not going to be a main World versus World player or anything, but I just think it'll make it easier and it seems quite exciting. But I'm at the point now where I just don't believe it's happening. Like, if it actually comes out, it is only a blessing.
Yeah.
It is a gift.
Sneb has openly said that if alliances come out this year, he will crawl on the ground, cover himself in Vaseline, and pretend to be a slug.
Okay. So ArenaNet's on it, right? This is not just a beautiful dream that we're all imagining. It's gotta come. Or is it 2023 or 2024 is the deadline?
There's no date.
There's no date. There's no deadline. We don't know.
You gotta set a deadline, dude. It's much like how Teapot's gonna be doing the marketing. You are gonna set the incentives for the devs. You are the one that is pushing for alliances, Sneb.
No, it's not. It's not gonna happen. Trust me. But it's such a terrible mark on the Guild Wars 2 community. It really is. Like, it just, well, not on the community really, just on the game. I mean, the community is fine. They're all excited for it. But now everyone just imagine how hard this would be to be ArenaNet, to be the person that's talking about alliances now. Because this is what goes through my mind. Every time I see alliances, you know the Arthur like fist meme where like the clenching happens? That's me. There's just like a little bit of anger, right? Just like a little bit of malice that happens. I'm just a little upset about it because they keep talking about it, but I don't care anymore. I don't care.
Oh no.
If it doesn't come out, then I don't care. Right?
So
you can talk about it all you want. So they're in a terrible position because I think a lot of people probably feel similar to me. They want it to happen so bad, but whenever they talk about it now, there's just very little faith that anything's going to happen.
I actually want to zoom out here a little bit. This is going to be a slight derail, but I want to zoom out. The sentiment that Sneb is expressing right now, in my opinion, is actually very reflective of how almost every veteran player in the game feels about their respective game mode.
Oh yeah.
And I'm super curious what you make of that, really, like, coming into the game, because I chat with Preach about this on a previous TeaTime, and he was saying that, oh man, like, it's really weird to play through all the raids in order knowing the release dates. Right, he actually roasted the game pretty hard for releasing 3 bosses like every 3 to 4 months or something. He just like absolutely like railed the game for that. I'm super curious, like, because you have a totally different perspective. Like, you're coming into Guild Wars 2 and you have this really weird experience. Whereas for example, when I've been playing WoW recently, there's one raid in the game, right? Yep. There's just one raid. It's got bosses in it. It's got 9 bosses. That's the current content. But in Guild Wars 2, you have this really interesting experience where all of the content is kind of piled up, and you never have to wait for it. It's kind of all there. And until you've caught up, you don't really have that experience of how long it takes for the game to release new things. Because that's probably the complaint that really rubs people the wrong way the most over time, is that, man, nothing happens. Like there was and this, I think this actually really this is why when something goes wrong, the community erupts. This previous Fractal, honestly, is it the worst thing in the world? No. Is it imperfect? Is it not what players were looking for? Absolutely not. And I understand why people are pissed off and upset. But that is multiplied 1 million times when the last dungeon, for context, was 3 years ago. Okay? Like that that is where things really get out of hand. Is that,
there's a lot on the line every time.
Yeah, exactly.
Every time one of these things
stakes.
comes out, everyone has full microscope on everything that could go wrong. And it's so difficult because in some ways this is reflective of how much people really care about it. They want it to be successful, but because it's not going to live up to this level of perfection and idealism that everyone has, because they've just been so hyped, they're just bottled up waiting for the next thing, that it disappoints people every time. Every time people feel disappointed. I actually think it's a really unhealthy relationship to have with the content in the game.
But it sounds horrible.
You can kind of understand, and validate people's feelings to an extent, because they will always have this like really high expectation because it's always taken so long for the next thing to come out. And so they're like, surely it's been so long. Clearly this thing must be really, really good. And then it comes out, there's a bunch of bugs, or it's not quite what they thought. And all that does is compound this problem to the point where people want to explode, and people will just say horrible things about the content. And maybe some of it is extremely justified, and then some of it maybe pushes it a bit too far. But you can't really blame people because it's the only thing they have to look at right now. And it's even worse because they know that the next thing is so far away that this is the content they have to play with right now. So even if they don't like this, or if it's too hard or too easy or too mid or too whatever, it doesn't matter. No matter what it is, it's the only thing that they have. So no matter what, there's going to be some subsection of people that are not happy and will just relentlessly unleash their fury on this because they don't know when they're going to get something that appeals to them.
So my ideas on that, I actually have two kind of centralized ideas. One of them is that the biggest thing I want to see from SOTO is the expansion that comes after it, either releasing the same exact amount of instance content or more, because they're promising 1 fractal and 2 strikes a year. That's a whole lot more than you're getting right now, right?
True.
It's been 3 years since the Kuna Peaks, right?
True. I guess you could argue there were more strikes with EOD, right? Because there were like 4 strikes with that, 5 in total. But yeah, in terms of like the yearly amount, it is way more. It is so much more.
Was EOD a year or 2 years?
EOD, well, it's actually really hard to quantify that because now we get into the really fun stuff. Guild Wars 2 was essentially going into maintenance mode is uncharitable. Semi-maintenance mode with
IBS was real bad for it.
I'll be fair. It was being wound down, and ArenaNet were going to develop other games, right? And then what happened basically was NCSoft, which is the parent company, said, actually, no, you're making an expansion. And then they were like, oh, make an expansion. So they basically had to just zerg it out. So we don't really know how long it took them. But I think the theories are it was honestly like kind of like a year turnaround, right? That it took them to build it. But that's not really known because of the nature of where the game was in terms of its development cycle. It's actually remarkable. You played through season 4, right? Like Living Story season 4?
I've done all the story now. I've done all the story.
Did you notice how the end of season 4 was a bit of a roll credits moment?
Yeah.
where you have that cutscene. Yeah, this is actually confirmed by a disgruntled ex-developer that basically they were instructed, a writer, in fact, the writer who you heard about the drama around, they actually confirmed that they were basically said, make it an ending that kind of works, but leave it open-ended just in case, right? That was their brief going into that. Like, the game nearly ended with Season 4. It was this close to just, that's it.
Really?
Yeah.
Season 4 was at that point? Season 4
Yeah.
felt very strong.
Well,
It was
no.
very strong,
It was strong.
relative to a lot of other things.
To be clear, the game was not dying. It's that I think the game director, a developer by Mike O'Brien, of course, you may have heard of him from World of Warcraft as well, of course, because he used to work on WoW. I think he just wanted to do other stuff. I know it sounds weird, but hey, like, everyone gets bored, right? At some point, right? You want to do some new things, and I think he was kind of leading the studio in a slightly different direction, wanting to try out some other projects. And, they this all got leaked as well. There were a bunch of like unannounced stuff they were working on, right? There were loads of devs that got moved off. And this is a big turning point for a lot of veteran players. They felt very betrayed. A couple of friends of mine just like quit the game basically, or stopped caring about the game nearly as much because they felt very betrayed by ArenaNet that, oh, you didn't tell us that you were winding down the game. Right. And then, of course, it didn't work out because none of the projects came through, and they went, they very much went back onto to Guild Wars 2. But that was kind of where the game was. During that Season 4 Icebrood saga, that was actually kind of precarious for Guild Wars 2. I don't think the game would have died, to be clear, but the content development would have essentially become maintenance. There's a universe where that happened.
Here's the storm.
Yeah, exactly. They would not have shut it down because, hell, Guild Wars 1 is still running, right? And it's not like the game doesn't make money. It makes money. But, it was definitely in a weird situation. And then EOD worked out pretty well, it worked out pretty well, and it kind of got the hype back, right? At least a little bit. And now people, Oblivion comes for us all once again. Couple of rough updates, right? Guyala Delves, the tunnel, right? Sneb still hasn't played that, by the way. You've played more story than Sneb. I'm just exposing.
Dude, the tunnel, the meta was pretty god awful. I'll be honest. That was probably the worst meta I've done in the game. From playing it all from one experience, I didn't do a lot of the core metas, but from HOT and onwards, man, getting on those turtles and not having a turtle, nothing's felt more like brokish than to me, man. I felt like everyone on the turtle was just laughing at me. I was the poor kid who was like, what do I do? And then I realized halfway through, oh, I can rent a turtle. Great. Now I can finally contribute. Did not expect that when I went into the tunnel, because the first part of the event was really good. I really liked the first part of the delve, right? Like all those like mechanics of having like the breather or whatever going down there. It's just kind of neat stuff.
Wait, you like the breather? Why?
Yeah, I like the weird map stuff. I like the drizzlewood.
You are like the 0.0000001%. Everyone says that they hate that mechanic. And I don't have like a particular feeling about it one way or the other, but I'm just curious why you say that you enjoy it when so many people say that they don't.
It's novel. It's new. It's different. Like, I go down in there, I'm learning a new system, I'm interacting with a map in a different way, I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, oh, okay, so I have a couple of different options where I can make it to where, like, okay, if I'm picking up chests, then I'm getting charges, or if I'm doing events, I get charges. Okay, so I can have sort of different gameplay. That's neat enough. That's a positive. It's not, like, the biggest thing in the world, right? But it's not really harming my gameplay experience anyway. It's just kind of like a neat addition, much like how the Drizzlewood metas were, right?
This guy's a weirdo.
We should,
he likes strike
the
missions,
listeners.
guys. He likes strikes missions. He's a
for the listeners, can we explain how the breather works? Here's the funny part. I don't know exactly how it works because I haven't played the content, so I can't even really speak to it. My understanding is that you have to go and like pay for a certain buff or something so that you don't die in the tunnel.
It's like there's literally one for 0 copper. Like there's like almost no cost. And you go in there, you have the charges, and you're trying to stay alive. Obviously, it's a very small thing you have to pay attention to. It's literally free, yeah. No reason to exist? I disagree with that just because I think it adds a little bit of texture. It changes it. I think having every map be just like a pretty area that you go around and you interact with it the exact same creates for uninteresting maps overall. Like I think about Living World Season 3 did a really good job of making things a bit more interesting. Right? Like you had the volcanic launch points on the volcano islands, you had the like Spider-Man ability and Draconis Mons. It was just the little things, right? That kind of made things neat, different.
Yeah.
I think the main difference is those are something that you actually engage with, right? Those are something that are interactable, whereas the breather is just like you, hey buddy, make sure I don't die. Okay.
When
Now I
I
won't
looked at
die.
that, I haven't played content as much as a lot of people in the chat for sure. But for me, I think about it as like, okay, so like they're incentivizing me in the way that there's like more chests if I use like the treasure hunter one, right? Maybe that's just like a copium thing. Maybe like that doesn't actually provide more GPM or anything like that. But that's like what it kind of read as to me from like my base understanding.
Interesting.
Yeah. I just want to say you brought this up. The Living World season 3 and 4 stuff I actually think is super fun. When I think
Yeah.
about some of my favorite times in the game, I go and I have these memories of Living World season 3 and 4. And I didn't really stream or do anything like that at the time, but I remember I was a student. I think I was in my second or third year of my undergrad, and I remember when what's that map called? Dragon Fall? Is that wait?
Yeah,
The
Dragonfall.
last
Yeah,
one before,
the last one.
yeah.
Yeah. So I remember when Dragonfall came out. And I remember zoning into the map, and my then girlfriend, now wife, she walks into the room, and I'm just kind of like standing back, and I'm just like, wow. And she says, "What's going on?" And I just said, "This map is so cool. Like it's
Yeah.
beautiful." And then I zoomed out and was explained to her there's the different like areas in the map, and the dragon is like a part of the map, and the meta is all over. And I really liked it. I always thought that those maps were just so creative, so beautiful, and they really made you feel like you were in like a living, breathing environment. The metas were really engaging in some way. I will say that Dragonfall, I didn't love that the chests were
Yeah.
all over the place at the end, but regardless, I thought that it was a really cool environment.
I love the environment of Dragon Falls. Hated the meta of it.
The meta
I felt like
sucks.
I felt like my overall activities in Dragonfall were just kind of like nothing new. It was such a different and like unique looking area with a dragon in the center of it that's like dying, right? Uh and it didn't feel like the map was unique in any gameplay way, which I would have preferred. I would have preferred if it was had something like very, very like intrinsically different, right? Having the delve be a little bit different means that every time I go there, I'm just going to interact with in a little bit of a different way. Maybe the breathers could have been expanded on more, and I don't know enough about them yet to really say much on it. But I kind of liked it from a base appeal. Just going in there, looking at the system, be like, all right, yeah, cool.
Interesting. Where are we going
I
with
feel like
this?
I'm getting all nostalgic now for some of the
Where
old.
are we going with this?
Yeah, where are we going with this? That's what I'm talking
Let's
about.
circle back to
Yeah.
one of my favorite things.
Oh, yeah?
Being raids in general, because I feel like
raids. Let's talk about raids.
seeing a raid from Zero is the first thing that got me into Guild Wars 2. I've been raiding now for like 6 years in WoW and then 2 years in Final Fantasy. I played Hall of Fame guilds in World of Warcraft, so I'm down to talk raid, boys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
blaster.
I'm very curious about your. So we've neglected to mention this so far. My understanding is that you are on the NA server. This is going to have a dramatic impact on your experience in the game, and not just raids, but overall the game. So how you've rated the game, all of that stuff. The context is that you are playing on an NA server rather than on the EU server. Correct?
True. It's true. 100%
Okay.
true.
Good. We've got that out of the way.
Yeah, so overall, I would say my experience with raiding in Guild Wars 2 is that at least from Wing 1 through 5, which is what I've completed so far, we were doing everything that we could on CM before doing any normal modes. We were trying to do the same thing on Doom, but that was the first fight that like legitimately could not be done, could not be truly progressed without doing the normal mode first. Just because of the way that the echo kind of works, it just holds all progression for me, or for our group at least. And we were going through with a lot of casual players, like Lunar's in the chat. He's been playing the game for years, but never really did any raids or anything like that. Same thing with some of our other players, some of our good friends that we got in. It's a very, very casual group. And then the CM first made fights like Sabbatha, or not Sabbatha, sorry, Samrog.
Samrog, yeah.
Yeah, Samantha.
Yep.
A lot more fun. On normal mode, now that I've gone back and done that on Pug, oh my god, that
It's lame.
is
It's so lame,
so
right?
bad.
Yeah.
I didn't love it on
Wait,
CM,
Samrock
but
CM?
Samrock on CM is fine.
Samrog normal
Samrock
mode
on
is low energy.
normal.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, you didn't like the CM? I think the CM is like the only way to play the fight.
It's the only way to feel the fight. Every time I do it in a Pug on normal, my brain is completely left the building.
It's really easy, right? Actually, I shouldn't have assumed that. Is the reason because it's so easy, or what do you perceive it? Why don't you like it in Pugs?
It's actually a problem that a lot of the raids have in this game is that there's a lack of mechanical density. Like if you look at VG, for example, is a fight with a lack of mechanical density. However, it does do something well, and that is the fact that everyone runs it like completely derailed or like completely unhinged and just have all the healers heal through the greens, and it makes it a fun fight. All right, cool. But then you look at Gorsevol, and the fight's not that complicated, and you know the unhinged way of doing it is just damaging through the phases, and now it's a really sleeper fight on Reform. It's a really sleeper fight when you just
You can
burst
hit
the
that
boss.
DPS check with like 4 people.
Dude, I hit that DPS check with a full blind group almost. We were fully blind. This was the third fight we ever did in the game, and we got to 67% on one of our first pulls.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
And I'm curious how your experience with this is actually, because the Guild Wars 2 difficulty is very front-loaded. All of the difficulty in a lot of this stuff is actually learning to use the combat system. The encounters themselves, after you understand the combat system, will get blitzed. Like, you basically brute force more or less every single fight in the game. There are a few notable exceptions. For example, the Path of Fire raids are typically they have a lot of like specialized roles, right? Like, you know, what this guy's got to do this, otherwise the group dies, right? So they have some of that going on there. But certainly wings 1 through to 4, and some of the bosses in 5 through to 7 as well, to be fair, you brute force them hard because the encounters themselves are not that difficult. All of the difficulty is entirely front loaded into basically pressing buttons, right, into piloting your character. And this is true this is actually even more true in Fractals. And in fact, historically throughout the game, it's been even more so. For example, for some context, I think you'll find this really funny. The original meta for dungeons in Guild Wars 1, have you played dungeons, by the way, actually? The dungeons?
I did a little bit,
yeah,
because the first days that we were playing, I wasn't able to get any exotic armor off of the auction house, so I was like, I'll go into dungeons, sure.
Yeah.
And so we ran Flame Citadel a couple times.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, that was fun. We just picked a random one that we knew we'd get Berserker gear from it, and we just blasted. It was actually a pretty good time.
Yeah. So the original metagame for beating dungeons, this is in vanilla Guild Wars 2, back in the core game, you would basically run through the dungeon as fast as possible with 5 glass cannons, and then kill the boss in about 10 seconds. That was basically
in core.
In core, yeah. So you would just run through, and this is true in Fractals as well. You would basically use a huge amount of burst damage to just CC the boss, because back in the day, you could actually CC bosses. You had to basically CC them a certain number of times, basically, and then you could actually just fully CC them and lock them down, essentially, with a mechanic called Defiance that eventually got reworked into the Defiance bar. And you just ran in and blasted it. And this was really interesting, actually, because it kind of required some mechanical skill to pull this off. So there was this really big contrast between how Pugs could kind of execute this strategy and how organized groups could. And this has almost been like the history of Guild Wars 2. Like, if you if you're good at pressing buttons, you're good at attacking while moving, you can blast out your rotation. The game is a total joke, right? Like, it is insanely easy. But the thing is, if you are a player who hasn't kind of practiced those skills, hasn't refined those skills, the game is like, how is this even fucking possible? I can't win. It's over, right? And this is one of the really fascinating things about Guild Wars 2, is that I think it ends up being really challenging and honestly brutal, and not in a good way, by the way, for new players, right? It's not fun for me to hear how about a lot of new players have a lot of difficulty with this content. I think that sucks. It feels super bad. We're like, man, like, these players are having a tough time with this stuff. But on the other hand, once you get over this kind of mechanical hump, the game is like, oh, I'm bored. Because it's not
that,
challenging you. It doesn't push you anymore. Because of just the nature of how it works. You just brute force everything at some point. And then what's left to you is you basically have to say, well, I guess we'll just try and kill it 1 second faster, huh? That's basically what you got to do, is you've got to kind of do that thing. I'm very curious what your experience is with that, and kind of what your opinion is on that style of difficulty, in the game, and like what you kind of think about that.
I rated the game as a whole as about like an 8 out of 10, right? And I would say my rating experience, it has a lot of peaks and valleys. It has a lot of peaks and valleys. For instance, like just getting a group of new players into a raid is a struggle, not because the content, not because of like the idea of raiding is scary, which is a problem that a lot of people face, right? People maybe playing this game for 10 years and they still have never touched a raid because they heard the big bad boogeymen are in raids. They're going to kick them out of their dungeon groups or the raid groups if like they don't blow enough of their own weight. Yada, yada, yada. It's toxic. The biggest problem I had with it was like trying to go onto Zera with everyone having leyline gliding. That was one of our biggest hangups.
You know what's really funny about that? On the launch of Heart of Thorns, the experience required for all of those masteries was about doubled. Just as a little fun fact for you there.
Yeah. I've only done up to Wing 5 so far, but I would say overall my experience is about like a 6 out of 10 on the raids themselves. Because some fights I really, really enjoy, but then when I find out like afterwards that the way that people do them nowadays is just hit it really hard, I'm just like, well, I thought we had a fun solution to it. MOCM, for example, that was a really fun fight to figure out.
Yeah.
Because when we were going in blind, we were like, oh, are they like, okay, so these are all chess pieces, obviously. When they get to the end, are they turning into a queen? And thusly, like, everything that, like, they hit, like, is turning into those red spaces. Like, oh, okay, no, it's like actually they're just walking over them. So we need to prevent them from getting over to the other side for sure. Maybe we can let in one at a time because our DPS checks weren't being met in a way to where we just blast through it. So we actually had to think about like what we were doing in each instance in that fight. And it's actually a problem I had a lot with Wing 5 was that the roles in Wing 5 pretty much mean that like SH is a 3-player fight, right?
Oh,
you
yeah.
have the 2 tanks and you have the pusher.
And then nobody else does
there,
anything. It's just pumping, It's just blasting.
Everyone else there is existing to look pretty and make sure the boss dies relatively well and don't kill the TD on me, or else I'll like rage quit in a few pulls or something like that. Then the fight in like MO, the way that we did it blind was so very different because we had the 3 roles that were very obviously set, right? And it worked well with Guild Wars 2's like non-defined tank, right? Because we were just able to put that onto anyone who had a little bit of self-healing. We put it onto our Tempest, who had never tanked a raid fight in her life. Then we had the Protect, which we slowly like started to learn. We learned like every single mechanic in that fight intimately, and it was an amazingly wonderful experience. And then we went on to Samrock, and it was like pretty good.
Okay.
It was like all right.
Yeah.
Samrock was a fun fight, but we brought like 6 Revenants and didn't know that they did 1,000% CC. So like there was just no real challenge on Samrock CM.
Yeah. Do you know what's actually really funny? You really missed out on that one. Because that fight used to actually be, back in the day, it was brutal. It was probably the hardest fight in the game. For a good amount of time. You could make an argument that Demos was slightly harder, but I'm not actually totally sure if that was true. Like, when that came out, it was brutal. Back then, you had about half the DPS, no protection, very little stability access, just across the board. Everything about that fight is probably the fight that has suffered the most from power creep. It's essentially been destroyed by power creep in the game. It was awesome. It was absolutely incredible. But now it's essentially completely trivial. Yeah, it's one of the fights that has been broken the most by the progression of the game, unfortunately. A lot of fights are like that for sure. A lot of fights essentially have been, their integrity has been severely damaged by just a huge amount of power creep. Again, I'd say that compared to on launch, and this might also give you some insight into why raids just never really took off in Guild Wars 2. On the launch of Heart of Thorns, the you were probably half the strength that you are now. To be honest, like you were so much weaker back then, and it wasn't just like the damage; it was like everything. Everything was weaker in every way, more or less overall. And part of that is not just the DPS numbers. There were some like really broken builds on launch back then. Obviously, there always are. But it was more like the way the comp plays out. Back then, you could run 4 DPS specs, and you ran 6 supports because Guild Wars 2, right? Now you run essentially kind of 8 DPS players, right? You run 6 full DPS and then 2 mostly DPS players, right? With the with the aggressive supports, right?
Support,
Exactly. So you kind of have like double the DPS players almost that you did back then. In addition to healers being absolutely insane in the current meta, like the boon support builds are absolutely crazy.
My opinion on that is that I think it's good that DPS has gone up and probably made it to where it's viable for everyone to be in the raid, right? Like any class can be taken into most of these raids as long as it's not like HTCM, right? However, I really dislike one of the biggest things drawing back my like enjoyment of raids is the concept of 100% uptime on like support abilities, on quickness, alacrity, on protection. Like, it just feels so pointless if you need to have protection 100% uptime or can't even provide it in the first place, because that means you just design your fights
around it. Yes.
30%. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the point? You go into WoW, right? Are you playing Holy Paladin? I think I saw you playing a Paladin the other day, right?
I'm playing a prop Paladin, the big tank.
Prop Paladin. Okay. Yeah. But like on Holy Paladin, like you have like massive mitigation coming from Devil Aura, and you can pump it to like, I think 15% or something like that nowadays. And having that decision making of like, okay, 15% mitigation on your raid for like 8 seconds, something like that, on a 2-minute timer. That is very strong decision making for me. And you can see from abilities like Rune of the Great Dwarf or whatever it's called, Rite of the Great Dwarf on Revenant. But it's just so inconsistent, especially whenever everyone, for the most part, can provide 33% protection. It just feels irrelevant. It really detracts from the building of the raid in that part of my mind, right? Like in Final Fantasy, I love it that like your tanks and your healers are oftentimes very much kitted out to perform like big mitigations on set timers to react to different mechanics. And there's a problem with healing in that game for sure. But also your DPS are getting involved. They can do things like called feints or addles that can also lower the amount of damage coming out. So like everyone is involved with mitigating the damage, and they have restrictive ability timers, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, things they've got to think about consistently. And then in this game, like we go on to Doom normal, we go on to Doom CM, and we actually have like 100% uptime on protection. And it just feels like, why? What's the point? It actually detracts from the experience for me.
Yeah, this is one of the things that actually did change. Like back in the day, the game was a lot more like this. Out with a few exceptions, you would basically have might all the time just to do more damage. But yeah, back then you would only have quickness for a very small amount of time. You would only have protection somewhat infrequently, right? Certainly a lot of boons like stability and Aegis were also a lot less common. This is definitely something that the game has evolved to, and I think it's because ultimately, I think ArenaNet wanted to make the game easier. Because one of the biggest problems with raids is that they released with no difficulty settings, so they were just kind of rock hard on launch, and players just bounced off them and had a lot of difficulty just getting through them. And power creep has been a way to kind of make the game easier, in a sense, I think, with that stuff. But yeah, I think it's actually a system that is really frustrating players right now, because a lot of the balance of the game is fixated on boons, right? And it's ArenaNet is having some difficulty kind of making all the boon supports kind of pan out right and play nice with each other, essentially. And it's a really hard job. And a big part of that is because everything's at 100%. So if you're a healer and you can't do 100% of that, well, you're trash. GG.
Why would you be taken?
Right? Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And this is the issue, because everything is so extreme in the game, right? This is where the power creep is, I think, really kind of bitten ArenaNet in the ass here. Is that now everything has to do this, and if it doesn't do that, then players, and look, we know this. It's not, to be clear, it's not rational. Do you have to play the best in slot? Absolutely not. But come
No.
on, guys. We know how people play games. People want to play the best in slot. They want to optimize, right? This is the way people engage with games, right? Especially MMOs, right? And honestly, especially team games where you might lose, right? Like, you know, if you can do anything to increase your success rate, players are going to go for that option, right? Like, that's just the nature of it. So you do need to have this kind of this equality between all these builds, and it's really difficult to do that within these MMOs, especially with the way that boons work as well.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are like saying that things are becoming a little bit too much homogenization, right? But I do think the game needs that level of homogenization, especially since there are 27, 29 or something like that.
Yeah.
Different specializations, 9 times 3, 27. You need to be able to bring people. Because, first of all, the LFG's dead on NA. I just want to take anyone, right? And then, secondly, like, whenever your class specifically sucks, that's the worst feeling in the world because the class that you play is your lens throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah.
If you can't go do content on Necro because Necro is just so unplayable, you'll have a far worse experience with the game. And not everyone has like the dedication or the want to play ults, right? Like I'm not a big ult Andy, right? I like to learn what all the classes can do. That way I can call it for specific things whenever I raid lead. I do a whole lot of raid leading in WoW and Final Fantasy, and so that's why I level up those classes. But then once I'm settled, once I know everything, I'm playing what I like. I'm playing like 2 or 3 classes tops.
For sure, yeah. And I think that's obviously, you know, that's how a lot of players play MMOs as well. Because it's all well and good to say, hey, just reroll. Because I'll admit it, I'm kind of the opposite of you. I'll play anything. If it's busted, hell yeah, let's go. Yeah. Right? Like, you know, I'm about that. You know,
a lot of players in the high end are like that, Teapot, for sure.
And I think a lot of, but I also recognize that a lot of players don't want to do that. People want to play their Elementalist. They want to play their Necromancer. And you know what? I like that. You want to get into the game? You want to RP? Honestly, I'm in favor of it. Let's go. It's all, you know, it's an MMORPG after all, right? You know, you want to kind of get it into your character. So I think that's totally cool. So I understand why players want that, you know, want to make sure that their build is good. And to be fair, by the way, Ada has not done a bad job. You know what? If anyone who's complaining about balance right now, guys, look, you should actually go and play WoW right now. Right now, there is the God comp in WoW Dungeons. You play Bear, Holy Paladin, Fire Mage, Shadow Priest, and Augmentation Evoker. That is the God comp, right? If you want to get into stuff and you're not playing that in some of the higher level keys, it might not work out so well for you, okay? It is the God comp. That's not a derail. That doesn't count as a derail, by the way, guys. I'm actually pointing out that, you know, Guild Wars 2 players have no fucking clue how good you got it, right? Guild Wars 2 is actually pretty well balanced compared to the absolute clusterfuck that is other MMOs, okay? I think Final Fantasy handles it by just saying, you know what? You don't have any build diversity. You know, everyone is, you know, you have a build. This is how it is. And I imagine that kind of really helps, right? With keeping the game
one or 2 or maybe 3 builds.
Yeah.
The only very weird class in that game is Black Mage because they can run like anything for any boss, and they're like have like spreadsheets for every single boss and how like to optimize their position for standing on certain locations to maximize their ley lines and whatnot. And it's just like, okay,
yeah,
not taking you to Prague.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, Sneb's back. He was out there. He was just enjoying it. He was just.
I was just, you know, I heard the WoW chat and I just like immediately.
He's awake. No, he didn't dissociate. He woke up when we talk about WoW. Like he's smelling the syrup, guys. If you know what I'm saying. But yeah, Sneb, let's go.
I will not taste the syrup.
Yeah.
No.
So Sneb, when are you installing WoW or Final Fantasy so you can try out more rating?
I will not do it. I will not do it. I will stay on the path.
I think you are doing yourself a disservice because Guild Wars 2 is a very good game. And it's better to have your opinions educated by the experience of more things around the market. Much like how WoW is stealing from Guild Wars 2, Guild Wars 2 should steal from the other games as well. And players should be demanding that they do that, I think.
If I play WoW, I will probably never come back. That's the problem.
Whoa! Dude, you can't say that. He said that on TeaTime, guys. He said that live. That's going in. I'm not cutting that out. I'm not editing that out, guys.
I'm really worried because I really like instance content, and all I hear is just good things about instance content in World of Warcraft, and I just love that stuff, right? I mean, my whole guild is about instance content in Guild Wars 2. So when I'm constantly hearing, oh, like there's these new raids and like they push all these new raids, I go, holy crap, that sounds really good. But I know that I would probably get like way too into it and would never be able to put it down. So that I'm intentionally not playing it for that reason. I'm afraid that I would get sucked into it and never do anything else with my life.
Everyone deserves a year where they go in and they just play like only WoW and they're like really sniffing the syrup, right? And then they're like, oh wait, yeah, now I get it. This is why everyone hates WoW, and then you just fall off. That's what everyone deserves, man. Everyone needs it.
True.
Yeah,
Dude.
I mean, I think it's important to have some context and whatever. I'm old now, man. I have 2 kids. I have a full-time job and I work kind of a part-time job as well. Yeah. I don't have time to play WoW. It's kind of the reality. I've probably don't even have that much time to play Guild Wars. I play far less than I used to. In fact, if you ever see me just online, it's because it's usually just in the background and I'm doing other things. But yeah, I've thought about playing WoW and Final Fantasy quite a lot, but I think if I did that, by necessity, I'd have to basically stop playing Guild Wars 2. And I'm already quite comfortable in Guild Wars 2. I wouldn't keep playing it if I didn't at least like it, right? I think there's 100%. Obviously lots of problems with it, like there would be World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy, but you know what? I've already kind of got my community here. My friends are here. I'm quite content, and that's actually one of the reasons why making an MMO nowadays is very difficult, because you have to pull people away from their incumbent MMO, the MMO that they've already sunk all their time and knowledge into. The idea of going and playing another MMO is quite fascinating because it would be all new to me, and I think that's kind of fun. But at the same time, it's also kind of a grind to learn all the new acronyms, learn about the community, the history of what's going on, have all that context. And though I think that's also part of the joy in playing any new MMO, I just don't know if I'm at a phase in my life where it makes sense to well, maybe I just don't care enough about it right now to do it, is the reality. I just don't really want to, because I know that I'd have to put in all this effort, and I know myself, and I wouldn't be satisfied if the effort was low, right? I would want to go in and go hard, and I just don't think I'm in a place to do that right now.
You just need to send the kids off to college, download Final Fantasy 14. They'll probably be on, like, I don't know how old your kids are. Let's say 12.0. And they'll have a great time, man. I can't wait for you.
You know, I could teach my daughter about old school RuneScape and have her harvest willow logs.
That could be big,
like several years and get 99 wood cutting. That could be
big.
You got multiple kids. You could be multi-boxing that, man. Like you could have 2 accounts going at the same time. You know, you could have like like an Iron Man going on, like getting that maxed. You know.
Yeah.
I want to see Sneb kind of max an Iron Man. I feel like he'd go degen on it. I want to see. You know what I want to see? I want to see Sneb go full goblin mode, all 99s, max cape. Like that's.
Oh my gosh!
You know what I mean?
Are you a big RuneScape guy, Teapot?
Oh no! I'm not a big RuneScape guy.
I like RuneScape.
Okay.
My first MMO.
Was it my first MMO? I think it was actually it was the gateway drug. It was. I played. This is the second one I played is not really an MMO. It's like technically got multiplayers on, but I played Adventure Quest and like.
That was my second one.
Yeah.
As a real MMO,
yeah. And RuneScape, and then I played stuff like Guild Wars as well, right? And honestly, a bunch of like kind of wacky MMOs, right? Like some kind of like real scuffed stuff, you know.
Those were the good old days.
Yeah. Dude, look, finding games on stuff like One More Level, like Miniclip and stuff like that. Okay, that's some good stuff, guys. Okay, like finding all these crazy Flash games and stuff like that. Oh, that was the day. That was the good stuff. And yeah, eventually then I played WoW after that, right? And then I played a whole bunch of stuff. Played EVE Online as well. That game's pretty cool. And a wide variety of things. Stick RPG, let's go. Yes, Stick RPG is big. That is a classic. That is classic.
I played Runes of Magic for a time as well. That was mega pay to win. It was not good.
Oh.
I think this is how my hierarchy went. I went old school RuneScape, and or well, just RuneScape at the time.
Mm.
That was so popular when I was in elementary school.
Oh yeah.
And
And
middle
that was
school.
the shit.
Everyone played it.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And then I played Adventure Quest a little bit, if you want to count that. Then I played Guild Wars 1.
did.
That's when I got introduced to Guild Wars 1. And I kind of popped back and forth between RuneScape and Guild Wars 1 a lot. I played World of Warcraft for 3 months because my friend was like mega addicted to it. He freaking loved that game. He'd stay up all night and be raiding and crap, and I had no idea what was going on. I think I made it to like level 35, and I was like, this is cool, or whatever. Orc Hunter, by the way. And
hell yeah.
I had a good time, but it just didn't really fit me, I think. I remember it being really fun, though. I like really liked the leveling experience.
I think there were really two true paths for MMO players, is that either they started off with like RuneScape and Guild Wars 1 and they kind of like evolved out into that way, or they started off with WoW and then like they got depressed in like 2020 with the COVID and everything like that. And because like WoW was so bad in Shadowlands and BFA, and it wasn't that great in Legion, even though everyone says it was great. A lot of problems with Legion. And then you like fell off and played all these different games, and now Guild Wars 2 is getting a little bit depressed because of IBS. And like, okay, well, when are raids coming out? And like, honestly, the big secret of it all is just play more games, enjoy what you like, go for the fun content. Don't just stick around with stuff just because you feel an intrinsic lock there. Like, you made friends in Guild Wars 2, you can make them anywhere probably, or bring them along with you.
Okay, I kind of agree or disagree. I think
drama.
It depends kind of where
Big
you
drama.
are. It kind of depends where you are in your life, right? If I were to say goodbye, everyone in the Guild Wars 2 community, I'm just going to go forge my own path. Well, I've already invested quite a lot in doing all of this, right? And I think it would just be a lot of time, right? I'm kind of happy where I am. I don't feel the need to go out and forge this whole new community somewhere else and go through that whole process. Though I do find it intriguing. I find it interesting. It's kind of about time commitment. I think a lot of MMO players, they were like me. They started playing RuneScape back in 2001 or 2 or whatever. Then they played Guild Wars 1, and now they're 30 or they're 35 or whatever, or some 40 plus, however old you are. They're older, right? They're not teenagers. And so they're just kind of content with their friend group, and they're happy with that. And making a leap isn't something that is as comfortable. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not trying to be like, oh yeah, I would never do this. But I kind of look at the prospect of doing that and go, I don't really find it worth it. Like it might be kind of fun for a day, but I'm kind of just happy. And I think maybe other people might feel similarly. They've kind of grown into this.
Sneb, you love instance content, right?
I do. I love instance
Don't
content.
look at it touching other MMOs as being like this big grind. Just think of it as, hey, I'm gonna log in and maybe I'll go play with Teapot. We'll knock out a Mythic Plus, and then I'm gonna go log back into Guild Wars 2 and hang out with my guild. You don't have to just like drop one thing for the other, right? They can exist both in the same sphere, just like how you might still play like League and then also Guild Wars 2, or other kind of like PvP games like a COD or something like that. It's like, just because it's an MMO doesn't mean you have to full invest into it. I think a lot of times, or at least for like these last like 20 years, people have been so tied to their MMOs that we have this restriction. And it's not just because of our lives getting older, right? Like us getting more mature, because every MMO player feels 30 on the inside, right? Or older.
He nearly is 30.
I'm not doing a good job of explaining this feeling though. I think Teapot, you and I talked one time off stream, I think, about this, how I think a lot of people that maybe played games more competitively when they were a teenager or a young adult, as they get older, they want that feeling, right? They want to feel like they're powerful and competitive without the time investment. So for me, I like being competitive, right? I like going into a raid and actually actually contributing. And the time investment that I think it would take to do that in WoW or Final Fantasy might not be something I'm worth doing to me anymore. I don't know.
Well,
I think it still could be. I just don't have a ton of time. And so the idea of having to level up or then buy a boost, it cheapens the experience for me to buy a boost, first of all. And so maybe I'm too much of a purist is really what it is. I think I could have fun doing that, but I already am having a good experience, so I'm not really sure why I would leave per se.
Fair enough.
And frankly, and look, this is mega transparent, right? Mega transparent. If I wasn't gonna play Guild Wars 2, I just probably wouldn't play any video games. I would probably just keep doing what I'm doing outside of gaming, which is hitting the gym now, trying to get back in shape, spending time with my kids. I'd probably just invest more time in those things. This is kind of like my small, fun hobby. And Teapot and I have talked about this a lot, but gaming has changed quite a lot to the point where it's almost unrecognizable to me. And I have a lot of qualms with how the gaming industry presents itself now and some of their tactics. So I probably just wouldn't be as involved in gaming in general, which maybe is a surprise to some, but I find it harder and harder to find people I relate to in gaming. I think I made the comment to Teapot the other day as well that I feel very alone sometimes when I game, which is very odd. But I don't feel that way in some of my other hobbies, right? Like, I don't know. I like to go play basketball, right? I don't feel alone when I'm playing basketball because everyone there is trying to be semi-competitive and you know that kind of stuff. I'm still not sure that I'm doing a very good job articulating this, but it's kind of where I'm personally at with Guild Wars 2 MMOs, gaming in general. Like I feel like especially this summer I've sort of distanced myself a little bit and I've been working on other hobbies and goals and things while still being able to appreciate Guild Wars 2 for what it is and just having as much fun as I can.
Oh yeah. You know what? As long as you still appreciate the game and are having fun, that's probably what's most important. And I do think even though gaming has expanded massively, right? Like from the times of 2000s, right? To now, like we all were alive that time period. It's blown up, right? Like everyone games, right? It used to just be like this nerdy hobby. And in that same sense, like even though it's so big, it can feel solitary in ways. Everyone kind of needs to find their basketball where their expectations are level with the people around them and they can kind of just have a good time. And you can find your home in like a place like Guild Wars 2 because I think the community is like a very, very strong aspect of the game, honestly, despite the LFG. And then you can also find like community anywhere else in gaming too. It's just like wherever you feel like a certain level of challenge that's appropriate is amazing. One of our raiders has been finding that certain level of challenge through the raids. He's very, very new to raiding. And Sneb, now that you've played through Guild Wars 2 and have done all the instance content, you probably have a load of muscle memory and understanding just in the base kind of way that you do things that you're not like
you're not going to be starting from scratch.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that
I'm
is
just
definitely
so competitive. Yeah, it's hard.
Well, I think it's definitely something you're underestimating there in yourself. I think I was going to mention this, but I think ReelyReed completely nailed it there. It is way easier to learn another game after you've already played one, right? Like if you wanted to go and learn WoW or Final Fantasy, you'd find it way easier than say learning Guild Wars 2 for the first time, right? That's just the nature of it because like you have a lot of kind of rules that you understand about how these games generally play out that would give you a huge advantage, I think. But I think what Sneb is really talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think you are you're kind of talking about almost you really like the environment that you've created for yourself, like the bubble that you've carved out for yourself in the game. And I think that's something that everyone can relate to, and I think that this is what everyone has, right? I think that's a big part of an MMO, is that you create your space in the game. Right, you have your friend,
another way
you
to
have your
say
guild.
This is I enjoy the guild and the friends that I've made in the community, and building this part of the community more than I actually do playing the game at this point.
Sure,
I've just grown. That's kind of my natural progression. By the way, I like building stuff and making things happen. It's fun.
I gotta want to be clear here. I actually think that's the natural progression for all players in MMOs. By the way, I think it is not possible to play a game for like 10,000 hours and go, wow, I still love this game for the gameplay and nothing else. It's so good. You can still enjoy the gameplay, but I think the more you play an MMO, the more it's going to become about the meta elements, right? Like the friends that you play with, right? The way that you play the game, the community that you build, right? The experiences that you have with other people. Like that is what the game ultimately is about. And I think that actually can be difficult to recreate when you move to a new game, right? Because especially when people, if it's hard to like move people with you, right? And I think certainly I think this is true. I'm not going to say Guild Wars 2 players. I think this actually is more true of Guild Wars 2 players. I think Guild Wars 2 players are tired, okay? Guild Wars 2 players, we're kind of an old dog, right? Not that fast anymore, right? Kind of just tired, right? That's us. So it can be hard with Guild Wars 2 players, but I think MMO players, once they played for a long time, it's like, you know what? I'm settled here, right? Like I'm good. I'm not really looking for something else. It's just I don't really have the energy to do it, and I think that's also like very, if you've had this like massive grind, I can understand not wanting to basically do that again, for sure. Like with this stuff. But yeah, I think it can be difficult to actually recreate the environment that you have for yourself, because after a certain point, the environment that you exist in becomes more than the game, and not having that can actually massively impact your enjoyment of a game, even if it's a good game. Like if you're going to Final Fantasy or WoW, these are not bad games. Like they have content. They've got things to offer you, right? They've got things to offer you. In these games, but
that's such a good way to put it.
Not having that environment is going to completely change how you interact with it, because as you play one game for a long time, that environment becomes the game, right? It is the game, and not having that, you're just going to be like, I don't get it. Like I'm not enjoying it, right? Because it's such a big part of that experience. But yeah, go ahead, Sam. I want to get Sneb back in on the mix.
I just think that's such a good way to put it, right? It's my enjoyment really comes from the community and the friends that I've made within the community. Heck, I've traveled. I went to Chicago, met a bunch of people from the community there. I went to Texas, met some people from the community there. I went to Seattle, met some people from the community there. I've been very blessed to actually meet some of these people that I've talked to almost on a daily basis in real life. And so to me, the friendships and the relationships are more important than the game at this point. And the game is simply a bridge that connects us. And so I can go and try to find a different bridge, but that may not make the same connections. And so I think at this point in my gaming life, I actually just really value that connection that we have here. And I don't necessarily feel the need or obligation to go anywhere else, because it's good, right? I'm happy. Yeah. And it's not even about the game, which is kind of interesting, because the more I'm talking about this, the more I'm realizing it actually has nothing to do with Guild Wars 2 at this point, really. Because I could just stop playing Guild Wars 2 altogether, and I'd probably just still talk to these people. But the Guild Wars 2 is what we have in common. It's kind of like if you all went to university, and none of you still go to the university really or anything, but you're all alum or whatever, and you all just can talk about that, and you have those moments, those shared experiences. Well, I feel like I have that with Guild Wars 2 with a lot of people. Like we can talk about when we first created the guild, and we progged this fight together, and all of that stuff. And many of us, especially this summer, just because it's summertime, taking a bit of a step back. Some of us have been going on vacations, whatever, but we still can reminisce about the things that we have done, and we can talk about the things that we are doing. And I don't know, I guess I'm just at a point where I'm happy with that, and I don't think that if I went to another MMO that I would have that, at least not right away. And the idea of having to invest, because this is like 3 or 4 years now that I've invested in this, right? The idea of having to invest to try to find that same community elsewhere it's just daunting. Yeah, and I could go play the game and appreciate the game for what it is and really have a good time playing that game, but it wouldn't fill my cup in the same way.
I 100% understand. That's really, really good. And I think something that is unique to Guild Wars 2 is that I think the community is incredibly strong in this game. We actually talked about it last time you were on my stream, Snap. Was that like I went to Ian and I saw that she was like talking about how like some people were getting involved for like the Tyria Pride. People put together like big wing events for like the Griffin riding. People do all sorts of things in this game that I will see sometimes in World of Warcraft, but they'll be like very, very set events. It feels like consistently there's kind of something going on in the community, like a fashion contest or something, right? And it also feels like my experience has been very, very positive on the regular. And maybe that's because I'm streaming, and I didn't really stream any other MMO before this. But I do think I connected with Guild Wars 2 because I know a lot of the people that I like the most in like my D&D groups and my IRL are like people who are big Guild Wars 2 fans. And maybe it has something to do with like the game actually developing and forming a good community and attracting people that are not kind of toxic assholes.
I think I got depends. I think your mileage may vary there a little bit depending on where you are in the game and what's going on. But yeah, broadly speaking, I think people are pretty chill.
Overall,
when things tend to go wrong, things can get a little toxic. When losing happens, open world can get a little frisky. When things start to get a little bit tricky, Dragon's End, that was a thing.
Listen,
general, I think we'll do a lot. I think we'll do a lot of cool stuff in the community, right? Like, I think that's something that I think the game's kind of massively multiplayer element really lends itself to that very well. It kind of enables you to do these events in a sense, right? And also what's good about the game that also kind of enables this is that there's very low barrier to entry in participation with a lot of things. It means that if I wanna do a raid in WoW, I'm like, people, you guys have got to get the right gear, right? So you got to do this first, and you got to do that first, right? Then you got to get into the raid, right? But in Guild Wars 2, it's like spend 30 gold on the trading post you're in, right? Yeah. Job done.
Or less.
Love it. Or even less. Yeah, even less than that, realistically, right? And like boom, but away we go, right? Like we can be blasting, right? Or let's go do this open world boss, right? And then like everyone's in immediately, and you can have like green gear, and who cares, right? Like you can just kind of play. Like there is like no barrier to progression, barrier to entry whatsoever for almost anything in the game. And I think that lends itself really well to actually being able to do stuff with people. It's why I really love the open world kind of meta trains and stuff like that, because I think they offer me something that I really enjoy in MMOs, is being able to play with a lot of people. I'm a streamer, and I'm a content creator, guys. That's right. So I love playing with my audience, right? I love playing with viewers, right, and people from the community who like want to learn. So I want to teach people how to do stuff, but it's like I can only do that with 5 people in PvP or in a dungeon, and with 10 people in a raid. But in open world, I can do it with like 60 people, right? In World vs. World, I can do it with 60 people. And I fucking love it. Like that is what I think is so fantastic about the game. My best memories were actually in Heart of Thorns, playing World vs. World with my guild. There was actually this one time, so World vs. World, just to kind of clarify here, you can fit about 80 people on a map from your team, right? So that's like how big it can get. There are 3 teams, right? It can be 80, 80, 80, broadly speaking. It's now kind of gone down a little bit. They reduced the cap a little bit to reduce the lag, because as more abilities have lower cooldowns, the server just lags out really hard now. Nice.
Oh, okay.
But it's about like 73, I think, ish. And there was one time back in Heart of Thorns where every single player on the map was my guild. Okay? Every single one. And it's those kinds of experiences that I think were just so much fun, right? And there were more people trying to get in as well. This is the funniest part. There were still more people trying to queue in to get into the map. But like we had completely filled this entire map with just our guild. It was absolutely fantastic. And those are some of my best memories of the game. And that is something that I think is irreplaceable, is having that massive MMO experience, right? It is so good. And I think that is why the game does have this capacity to generate these pretty large community events. It's because the systems kind of enable that to an extent, right?
That makes perfect sense.
It's possible. Yeah.
The best time to be a Final Fantasy player is 1 year after an expansion, when they release a new big zone where everyone's trying to get a relic weapon, and it kind of mimics the kind of ideas of like meta trains in this game. But then like this expansion, Final Fantasy, is like one of the worst in terms of like casual content, because they didn't release one of those zones, and like the casual player base are just like, what are we meant to do? They released new kinds of dungeons that are really sick, that are kind of like Mythic Plus in a way. That doesn't have a good reward structure, but that's beside the fact. The raids are really, really strong. We got released 3 raid wings that each have 4 bosses in them, so that's 12 bosses there, plus 6 extremes, 18, plus the 2 ultimates, and ultimates are some of the hardest rating in MMOs. And that took people like 2 weeks and like a couple of thousands of pulls to kill each of those bosses. So like it's no lack of content, it's just lack of content for like the casual audience. And I think the casual audience is very, very well served in Guild Wars 2. I think it's probably the best I've seen. And WoW is even trying to copy it with things like Yes Chef over in Azure Span during Dragonflight.
Yeah.
And it's not as good.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about
Oh yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go
Sneb.
ahead.
No, you go ahead, Sneb.
Okay.
Actually,
I was just gonna say, I think I think you hit the nail on the head. Guild Wars 2 does a very good job at catering to the more casual audience. And guess what? It just so happens that the more casual audience is the majority of players. And so by doing that, they actually have a very good time keeping a large amount of people happy just moving forward. But however, the problem is, I just want to see opinions on this. I'll give my opinion, but I don't know if I don't really have like facts or data necessarily to back this up. But I think one of the things that really helps a game thrive is when they have these little pockets of people doing something really unique and cool. We take a look at old school RuneScape. You see people doing these challenges with Ultimate Ironmans. No one's gonna do that. Like very few people out of that player base are going to take on those sorts of challenges and make all this content for it and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But lots of people watch it, and lots of people look at that as sort of aspirational content in a sense. Such as the same with like the most difficult high level rating in World of Warcraft, right? Most people aren't going to be able to do like the super fringe race to world first kind of content, but a lot of people aspire to that or think that that's really interesting. Guild Wars 2 doesn't really do that in the same way. They say that they have all this aspirational content, but when you look at how other games have that and present it, it's very different. But what Guild Wars 2 does very well is they say, you don't have to care about what other people are doing. You just care about what you're doing. And if you just care about what you're doing, you're going, you're killing all these bosses, you're progressing through the story, everything's dying to you, you're having a good time, you're the hero of Tyria. You don't have to worry about other people doing these super fringe things.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, and this is what I want the take on. On one hand, is it better to have these very niche things and build content for niche communities so that everyone aspires to it and it keeps them engaged in some way? Or is it better to just say, hey, we're not going to worry about that too much. Hey, we'll throw you a bone every once in a while, I guess. But for the most part, we're just going to focus on the things we do really, really well, which is make open world maps and bosses for people to explore and chat with their friends while they're the hero of Tyria.
I think.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I want. You know what? I'm gonna unleash. So I want to let Reely get in there first, okay? Before I just unleash hard.
I want you to unleash, Teapot. I want you to unleash, and I want to hear your opinions, and then I'll bounce off of that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go nuts.
The truth is, and this, by the way, has been incredibly confirmed from me playing other MMOs. Difficult content is a non-starter DOA unless you have it accessible to everyone. To those players who want to be the hero of Tyria, to those players who want to be the champion of the dragon aspects in Dragonflight, if you don't have a setting for that, your content is dead because nobody's fucking playing that shit. And the reason it works in other MMOs, the reason why World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy can have stuff in the game like mythic raiding, they can have ultimates. The reason that exists, and the only reason that exists, is because there is a story mode for that content. This is such a dead horse at this point. It's just like a skeleton. It's like, it's just the corpse has rotted away, right? It's a completely dead horse here. But those game modes do not work unless they are accessible to everyone. And I want to say this, guys. Stuff like looking for raid in WoW is so fucking easy. It's actually hard to describe. You can You could be complete garbage at the game. You could actively troll, and you probably still wouldn't be able to fail some of these encounters, okay? In some of this stuff. You'd probably still get away with it most of the time, right? And you'll just get hard carried. Like, and this is what you need. Because you know what? Let me actually defend my wonderful Heroes of Tyria and Heroes of Azeroth. I think it is perfectly fine to want to be like, oh my god, the boss is huge. We're blasting. There's like 20 people in it. We're pumping hard on this boss. This is crazy. We're going to get it down. Everyone's dying. And then, oh, we just barely got away with it. Yeah, that's a really fun experience. And I think that's the experience that most players want to have and actually do end up having in a lot of these games, right? They don't give a shit about, like, oh, if I press this button and this skill, I'm going to do 7% more damage. Or, oh, if I pick this trait, it will optimize my survivability by 3%, and that allows me to use this ability to use this defensive here. Nobody fucking cares, okay? Absolutely nobody cares about that. People want to have abilities and spells that look cool. They want to fight a dragon, okay? And they want to get a purple item, right? That is what people want. And if you don't deliver that in your instance content, then your instance content is dead. And Guild Wars 2 is the perfect example of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is the cold, hard reality of the situation. And if you try and do a halfway house, people hate it. And by the way, that's EOD Strikes and that's Silent Surf. When you try and do this, oh, we're going to try and make it hard, but we're going to cut down resources. We're going to make it accessible by making it less player skill intensive, but we're going to make the encounter kind of hard and kind of punishing to still make it difficult. It's like, well, now nobody's happy, right? Okay. It doesn't work. As much as I hate to say it, look, I love Guild Wars 2. Okay, I'm a Guild Wars 2 enjoyer. I'm a Guild Wars 2 simp. I've been called a Guild Wars 2 shill more times than I can possibly count. But let me tell you something. The content strategy for instance content in Guild Wars 2, it doesn't work. And it hasn't been working, and it's still not working now, unfortunately. And until that changes, realistically, we're going nowhere. And I'll go even further. This is the Unleash. As much as this genuinely pains me to say this. I actually, this is a tear to the eye. I hate to say this. Honestly, I'm almost afraid to say this live. I am not totally convinced that ArenaNet has the resources to dedicate to actually making instance content viable for them and satisfying for the community at the same time. Looking at the kind of like the way the content's been going over the past kind of like year and a half, I'm not sure if they can do that, right? Because the player base kind of wants these big spectacle fights that are also challenging. But that means you need difficulty settings, but it also means you need the fights to be punishing at the same time, which people also don't really like. And they have to streamline the mechanics and not make them super elaborate because they don't have the rules to do it. It's an absolute hell. It just doesn't seem like there's really enough juice in the tank to actually do this justice in the way that ArenaNet and the player base is going to be happy. And I hate to say that, I really do. But that is my read on the current scenario with this. I think the content can be satisfying for a very small amount of people. Because I'll admit this, I don't, and this is going to be a very unpopular take, but I enjoy things that are quite punishing and are, you know, essentially force you to do the mechanics well. As long as something is a challenge and it's not going to die first try, honestly, I'm kind of happy with that. I'll take it, right? You know, I like it when the bosses win. I like it when the bosses fight back. You know, I do love, you know, I think the raids in this game are great. I love the spectacle, right? But at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is something that's kind of brutal. That's why I like Harvest Temple Challenge Mode. Harvest Temple Challenge Mode, guys, is literally spread and stand in greens. Like, that is broadly speaking what it is. And then it's got a DPS check on it, essentially. And it's quite disruptive. You know, it will CC you sometimes. You've got to dodge stuff, right? Hey, I'm happy. But the thing is, that is not going to be good enough for most people, to be honest. And I completely understand and respect that. I think players want a little bit more of an intricate, complicated fight. Something like Doom, something like Kadim. But I just don't think that ArenaNet has the development resources to get anywhere near that realistically.
I think by intertwining the strikes with story, it allows them to kind of double dip on the resources, right? Like obviously. And I think that's huge. Because like we're looking at a fight like Zera that has this massive model, has amazing animations. How many people actually see Zera? How many people actually go into
100%.
Wing 3? Yeah, exactly. Like that's just not financially feasible for them. And it's the same thing with WoW, right? Like we're saying, like we need these intermediary like things like LFR for people to go in and experience it. Final Fantasy has these big elaborate stories that center around each of their raids that are removed from their MSQ. And like, all the more casual players are able to filter in and kind of enjoy them for the first few weeks. Maybe they can like go through for an entire 7 weeks to get their like weapon and a full set of normal gear done, and they'll feel satisfied from that. Um, Having no sort of raid content that is SaaS viable for the majority of the player base is inane. It is insane. Like it does not make sense from a content or like from a strategy point at all, right? Like we say the game doesn't market itself. It doesn't market itself well in game either. Like we have these amazing potential fights, but hardly anyone can really access them because they hear the word raid and they get terrified of the idea going into a 10-man group and being judged. There needs to be something like an LFR. There needs to be a consistent tempo, right? Like SOTO is a potential for that. Where, okay, if we see SOTO having 2 strikes, 1 fractal, next mention, 2 strikes, 1 fractal,
Boom.
bam, we're on a perfect schedule. It doesn't have to be a lot, it just has to be good enough. And they can build off from there.
I don't know. I think I actually want to preface this by saying one thing that I really hate right now in the community is that we doom and doom and doom, and it's actually destroyed a lot of my love
Yeah.
of the game because it's hard to be around people that are constantly negative. So I'm very hesitant when I critique now because I don't want it to come off like I'm bashing the game or anything like that. I I think it's very, however, I do want to address this because I think it's important. I think it's very difficult to gain momentum when your cadence for instance content is so slow because we just have that problem that we talked about before, right? Which is where everyone has this microscope over whatever you release because they know they're not getting another one until X time. Whereas games that more frequently push out this kind of content, they can swing and miss. They can miss and people will go, that boss sucked, but this other one was really good. The problem is if you're only releasing 1 fractal a year, if you miss, then it is a massive loss to everybody. Everybody feels it much stronger and much deeper than if they released 6 in a year and one of them was a miss.
Mm.
So I think it's important that they have this cadence, and I'm happy that they do have this cadence, but is it enough? I think that's what I was trying to tackle. Is it enough? It is risky, in my opinion. It kind of becomes, what's the point of releasing one if that one isn't going to absolutely home run every time? If it doesn't home run, then all you've done is pissed off a whole bunch of people that are going to completely complain constantly. And as someone who's been affected by this, I can say with absolution that there are not just myself, but a lot of people I know in the community, they actually really like the game and they really like playing the game, but being in the community is like terrible to them right now because they go to the Reddit and all they see are people just complaining about things. And at some point that starts to affect you. You don't always want to be exposed to negativity and be around this. So people are happy, and the new systems and the expansion, everyone just criticizes it into oblivion, and it's like they're unwilling to accept that anything could be good. And I find this to be a very problematic point in the community's life because if we're not willing to ever see anything good in anything, then you're actually going to push the people who are just kind of like, oh yeah, I like the raids and stuff. You're going to push them away. You're absolutely going to push them away because they don't want to be around you anymore. that's a scary thing, I think.
I 100% agree. Because that problem doesn't just exist in Guild Wars 2. Obviously, like we see it happening in Diablo 4 right now, where they just released a patch that everyone hates. Games Metacritic's down to 2.5. Had the same thing happening in Final Fantasy. We had the same thing happening in WoW. Ouch is right. Yeah. It's like when other people are around you, especially on Reddit, and just constantly dooming on the game, it detracts from the fun of the game that you could be having. And I agree with the idea that the 2 strikes and 1 fractal is not enough if they're going to make mistakes. So what they should do is release more bad bosses. Easy, right? Just release a copious amount of them, kind of like how Mythic Plus doesn't
think they
always
could
have to
do
be
that.
good.
Just
No,
nosedive
just copious,
the
just
game.
like
Like-
big, just bloat up a bear model, give it like a cleave and then like a stack marker.
Yeah, they
You
can't do that shit, man. Like, if ArenaNet did that, you know, the entire game would break. Okay, like that is what would happen. Okay, like
What it?
Like if there was like just a cow that you could fight, but the cow did like 1,000,000 DPS and just like one shot you every time you walked in. And they were like, "Yeah, this is the new instance
honestly,
content."
Release it as a 1-man challenge. I'll be down to grind that cow out. Give me the Cow Slayer title. That's all I need.
yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that MMO content is easy to design for, but I do think that if they allow themselves more space to be goofy and to make mistakes and mess up, I think it could only be a positive for the game.
Thing is, I don't think they can. I think
Can
they
you
can
elaborate?
do any more.
I'm kind of confused. Like, what does that mean? Because
Look at how
I
WoW
can't- I
releases
don't know
their
what you
raids. Okay, fair. So to put this in more perspective, like WoW releases like a raid with like 12 bosses. Only 3 of those bosses are actual fights. The rest of them are just kind of existing there to be like fluff. You run through them, you get your loot, and it's great. You're grinding through it. It takes you like maybe 1 or 2 pulls most of the time with like a somewhat decent group, even on Mythic. And you're like, oh, sick, we're done. Now we can actually do the raid. And like, you know, if you look at 3 bosses, what does that remind you of? It's like the raid wings in Guild Wars 2, right? They just have more bad bosses in front of them, and people are able to kind of grind through them. If people are like learning the game for the first time, they can kind of just like learn some of the basic systems there. It's like the strikes in IBS. Those are terrible fights, but I do think they allow people who are like getting new to the game to like experience something, right?
well,
Yeah.
I don't know that they're terrible fight. Well, okay, they're pretty simple, right? But they were designed intentionally to be sort of a gateway to raids. That was their initial intention. Did that work? Oddly enough, it actually worked on me because I had never done any instance content until they released the Icebrute Saga Strikes, and then I started doing those, and that's how I got into it. But I don't think I'm the majority there. We'll say. But yeah, they're very simple. They're quite buggy, but they do allow a gateway into instance content. But here's the thing: they did try to do this with the EOD strike missions with the normal modes. But I don't. My again, don't have a ton of data for this, but my opinion is that I'm not sure it's worked as much as they probably have hoped. Right?
We can
I
all
think they
agree
would
that
have
we can all agree they're not properly incentivized, though, right?
Yeah, they probably don't have the best reward system. It's very difficult to have incentives in a horizontal progression game. What do you give people? Just a bunch of outfits? Well, the problem is that in a game that doesn't have a subscription model, a lot of the best outfits you probably get from like achievements, and you're probably getting from the gem store anyway. So you can do that, but there's so many alternatives that it doesn't really push you in the direction of that instance content. I mean, even the infusion, what is that, the little pink petals, what is that?
Those are sick. I want those.
Whatever that is. I mean, you can get that by doing the Harvest Temple CM. And so people just like sell the CM, and then people get the infusion, or you get the drop and you just sell the infusion. So there's nothing really unique there either. It's quite a problem, I think. It's very difficult to incentivize something like this so that other people want to play. And that just raises an even larger question: is do you want people to play the game mode that don't even want to play it? We already have this with PvP to an extent, with world versus world, right? PvP, you have the Ascension, right? A lot of people really like the wings. They really like the legendary wings a lot. They think it's really cool. So, but guess what? You can't get that anywhere else other than PvP. So you have people that just they hate play the game for a couple months. They just play PvP and they hate it. They hate the entire experience, but all they want are the wings. They get the wings and then they never play again. People do this with raids with legendary armor. Do you really want people to do that? Do you want them to go and experience something just because they have to get the reward? I don't know. I think it's really complicated.
Yeah,
I
think
Teapot to.
I was gonna say, I just think that the key is trying to get people to try it at least, right? Like you want people to have like the incentive to try. Because I definitely agree with the Sneb. I don't think you don't want to like force people to play content, right? That's no good. But I think something that does happen a lot is that players don't try stuff. Players will just like kind of sit there and they don't even know that they would really like it, right? Like this is a classic story. I think this happens a lot with World versus World, actually. Players go like, oh my God, I can't believe I haven't tried World versus World for like 5 years. This game is awesome, but I just never tried it, right? And I think that happens. I think that happens a fair bit. I think it's good to like nudge people there, but I don't think you should be forced to do it. I'm not a huge fan of that type of design for sure. I don't think that's the way to go. But wait, what were you gonna ask me?
I don't know the full like extent of the game's history, and I don't know how it would be interpreted in a horizontal scale, because obviously this is my first MMO like this. But if it's just a cosmetic, like you are gonna grind for crappy cosmetics no matter what, right? Like they're going to be a pain in the butt no matter what. People make a new character and level up to level 10, right? Or something like that for Black Lion chess keys.
Yeah.
Why can't we just give out a key for doing like a strike, a daily or a weekly strike or something like that, right? We can give out one a week, right? Isn't the month isn't the
I mean, this is a good. I
Lion
want to be clear. This is a great idea, but I think the reason they wouldn't do it is money.
They're kind
But
of
you can just get the level 10.
Well, they're kind of doing this with the new Vault system that's coming out with the expansion. So I think they are gonna be doing that to get players to engage with content and so on and play a little bit more. So they are attempting to do that a little bit. And maybe some of that will be strikes, right? Like raids, like that. Oh, gosh, me. Some of that might be integrated in a way, yeah, for sure.
And I think one thing I kind of like from Final Fantasy that it can take is that if someone doesn't want to grind out PvP for an hour or like say 2 hours to get their little like wings or something, I don't know how long it takes. I've done it, but I don't know how long it took me. A long time, I guess. I don't know. I like PvP. Yeah. And maybe it'll take you twice or thrice as much to do it doing something else. Like I want to get my ascended trinket, my ascended accessories, whatever they're called. So people were recommending I go do winterberry farming. I'm like, hell no. I would rather do anything else than farm out some type of currency that's just like pick up nodes.
Fuck that.
So I got it from raids, fractals, other things, right?
Actually true. Yeah. Yeah, I mean there's a lot of different ways you can go about getting that. I think that's one of the strengths of Guild Wars 2 actually. But paradoxically, it's definitely one of the things that hurts some of the peripheral game modes is that oftentimes the easiest way to get something doesn't involve instance content, right? Like it's almost always going to be easier. For example, here's something that's kind of interesting, right? A full raid clear, if you can do it well, is probably the best gold per hour in the game, and it's definitely the best way to get gear in the game. Like no, not even questionable. Actually, it's easily the best way to get gold gear in the game. But the thing is that it's also, by the time you're able to do that consistently, you don't need gear anymore, right? Like that's kind of like the kind of the kicker here with this is that it's positioned weirdly in the game. I think with like where it is, like, and that's kind of like the problem with vertical progression or the horizontal progression in a way is that it's very difficult to make the content valuable after a certain point, because people always say, "Oh yeah, give gold to raids and strikes." I'm not gonna lie. I'm not totally convinced that would actually be that enticing to players, because even if you tripled the gold on raids, and I mean triple, so each boss is 6 gold per kill, the gold per hour for the average player would still be dog shit for doing raids, especially on NA. And I'm not saying that NA players are noob. I'm just saying it will take you a longer time to get a group, because in the gold per hour, you've got to include like the the group time, the setup time, like the work you have to put in to actually get into the group, right? Which is obviously going to be significantly longer, depending on like what time zone you play and so on, all this kind of stuff. So I don't actually think this is the really good way to do it. Like I think that you're absolutely right. I think the only way you can really incentivize people is by having really attractive cosmetics, and I think mount skins would be really good actually. And who knows? Yeah. Maybe we'll see that in the expansion, right? But it's definitely a tough sell from ArenaNet's POV, because so few players are going to engage with this content realistically, given the current in-game systems and just like the way the game plays out.
I don't. If you can explain to me, I don't get why they can't put a mount skin on a boss, right, and have it to where you can sell it on the auction house or something like that on the TP, because like people are gonna pay like Arena gems for gold, right? No matter what, like that's just gonna be a part of the game. Like it's been in the game forever, right?
Mm.
So if they see a really attractive mount skin for 10,000 gold, they're like, oh wow, this is my invincible. This is my big chase goal. This is gonna set up my entire look. I can't buy it on the gem store, but I can buy it on the TP. Let me go ahead and buy gems, or let me go ahead and do the content. I think that's just a positive for the game. It gives more value to doing the raids. Maybe it's like a 0.01% drop. But it's something sick to chase after.
Yeah,
They
maybe.
can't make it too good, because if they make it too good, then it devalues the gem store skins. And
But isn't it innately a gem store skin if it's spot with gold?
no, well,
Yeah,
okay,
it kind of is. He's
well,
got to put it.
yeah,
People
but-
swipe
but
for it.
Let's look at the
Yeah, it's why
Hold on,
infusions
hold on,
work
hold on.
out. Yeah, go. Yeah, go.
the economy. Let's think about the economics of this a little bit right now. I think
Okay.
a lot of I'm gonna get this wrong because I never buy skins on the gem store. But how much is a mount skin? I've seen some that are like 2K, aren't they?
2K gems is where they can be. Yeah.
How much money is that even? Is that like
That's $25, I think.
20?
I think something like that.
$25?
It's
Okay.
fucking a lot. Holy shit.
yeah? So it's $25 to get one mount skin. Or maybe it's a pack. I don't know. I'm gonna sound like a total idiot here because I'm not sure. If you put a mount skin on a boss, it will get farmed into oblivion. People will use alt account, even if you gatekeep it by a day or whatever. If it's daily or weekly, people will make alt accounts, and because think about it, you can buy the game for like $25. You could farm this thing that perceptually it should be worth about $25 if all other skins are that. So you're now like farming, hoping to get this thing so that you can sell it. Eventually the price goes down far below 2,000 gems. Far below. If you look at a lot of the things that you can farm in raids now, for example, there is a chair that drops from Doom, right? The infusions. These infusions are worth like 50 to 90 gold or something each. It's like nothing. And the chair is what, 150 gold? 200 gold? Something like that.
So
you have to make it rarer, right?
Yeah, exactly. The two things on that are you can just multi-box chalk infusion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to make it mega rare. If you want to do this, if you want to have like a skin like this and you want it to hold its value, it has to be mega rare. And also the thing about I think something else that's very important is that it has to be consumed. One of the issues with some of weirdly enough with infusions, especially the raid ones, once you're bored of your ghostly infusion, you can sell it.
You can? It's not account bound at that point?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh.
That's insane.
Yeah. And the Arena have actually realized this is a mistake, by the way. They have changed that. You can't do that with modern infusions that they've added to the game. But you can do that with the chalk infusion, by the way. If you're bored with it, you can get rid of it.
And the chalk infusion still retains its value, though, right?
Yeah, it's still
it's like
it is like we're talking like 1 in a million, right? For that one though, like it is just like one.
I actually 1 in a million.
I know one guy, quite a famous player actually, a player named Tyrone, and he is very well known for multi-boxing all open world metas on like 10 accounts, and he actually took a year of doing Chak every single day on 10 accounts to drop the Chak. He actually dropped 2 because he kept doing it on even more accounts for like another year after that and got another one. And he's basically like, he's farmed like every infusion in the game multiple times because he just perma multi-boxes everything. Like guy's actually insane. Yeah, he also innovated the PvP meta. He was in legend rating on like 7 accounts or something absolutely insane because he basically figured out that Burn Dragon Hunter was like really OP.
Yeah. To kind of cap that off, I think finding that appropriate amount of rarity for them would be big. And also just like we can see other equivalent things, like say it's like on a fight that is maybe a little bit less hard, maybe like something equivalent-esque to HECM. Like HECM's infusion still retains value, right? People are spending 6K, 7K on it, and they're buying raid clears for it. So people are going to buy raid clears for the mount for sure. People are going to buy it off the auction house for like 6, 7, maybe even more because it's a mount and not an infusion. And I think like something like that would just be, I think it's a win-win for ArenaNet and incentivize players to do it more. Or at least incentivize the players that are already going to be doing it to grind it out and make money for themselves. And they feel good. They feel that like, ooh, satisfaction whenever they get that big drop.
I think you presented like a really compelling argument. I'm actually very curious as to what the justification would be to not do it after hearing what you've just said, right? Because
development time to have it to where you can trade it, I guess.
Is it an ROI thing? Is it that making these skins and then putting them against bosses would actually not give the ROI that we think it would? Because like you said, people potentially are buying gems and engaging with the gem store in that way to get this thing anyway. It seems like it's a win-win, but there's got to be something we're not thinking of, right?
Well, you have to make it, and this is something that would be a bit of a tough sell. It's what Giant Dad Legend has pointed out here. You mustn't be able to buy it with the currency, and I don't think ArenaNet would ever do that, because basically right now there's you can't. Yeah, you mustn't be able to buy it with the currency, because right now you can buy these high ticket items for 1,000 shards or 2,000, and that's actually fucking nothing if you think about it in the grand scheme of things. That's going to take you a couple of weeks to get it, and that hard limits the value of these things really aggressively. If you want something to retain value, because if you could actually, if Chak had a pity timer, right? So let's say, oh, you've got to do 100 Chaks and you guarantee it, it would become worthless overnight, immediately. Yeah. One of the reasons why the Everbloom infusion, right, the Harvest Temple CM infusion is still valuable, is because the only way you can buy it is by beating HTCM. Otherwise, you cannot buy it. You can only drop it, right? Or you can buy it on the trading post, right?
TB.
So yeah. So it retains its value there because of that, right? That's the nature of it. And this is why it is quite difficult to retain rewards in Guild Wars 2, because in a way, Guild Wars 2 would have to kind of betray some of its core values in order to have meaningful rewards that drop from content. Because Guild Wars 2 really leans into the, don't worry, you're not going to get completely screwed by RNG thing, which personally, I actually kind of like. You know, I think it can be really frustrating when you're trying to like, oh my God, like, just drop. Please just drop. Give me the item, right? After like 20 runs or so.
Just allow you to get a personal amount with the currency.
Yeah, but
you can't sell it.
That's not good enough though, because then why would you buy it?
Then there's no prestige.
Yeah, why? Well, no, it's not even the prestige. Why would you buy it if you can get it very easily for yourself?
So right? Let's say it took you like 7-10 runs of like what is effectively like a tier below HCCM or something like that. Like you're saying that
if it was really hard, yeah, you could have something that would have some value from that.
Maybe it's important to talk about how the currency system works right now. You can go and int to Doom over and over again and get currency, right? Like you can go fail and fail. You could never kill a raid boss and get all of these infusions.
Is that how it works on like? Okay, but you can't buy. You can't buy
right now. You could go never kill a raid boss. Well, that's a lot.
Not
I think
Everbloom,
in order to
not
access
Everbloom?
the merchant, you have to get a kill. But my point is that you can farm the currency by just feeding to the boss, right? So you get the one kill or whatever you need, and then after that you could just die over and over and over again, and then you could get the Doom chair, which is kind of a bit weird to think about, because in some ways the Doom chair should symbolize that either you've gotten really lucky on the kill or that you've killed it a lot, such that you've kind of hedged your bets with the luck. But that's not the case now, right? That's why the chair and the infusions are so cheap. I hadn't considered that before when I said what I said before. So that's
you could make the argument of making it like something where you need a certain amount of like currency that specifically only drops from the kill, right? Like you always get this one currency, and you can trade it in for this item or for something of like similar-ish value. Kind of like how you get like the weapons master's marks from ranked PvP, or like whenever you're going for like a legendary item, how it takes like multiple of them to buy certain things. I guess you can kind of have that plus the currency, and that could be something that kind of gates it out to like multiple kills over multiple weeks, and it still keeps it prestige.
Well, I don't think people are feeding into raid bosses. Let's be honest. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean a bit hyperbolic. They're not.
If you give them a reason to. And the ability to.
I feel like it's easier just to kill the boss, though. No, like
it probably is. It's
kind
of like with Gorseval.
We haven't seen the bosses yet.
People teach the updrafts on Gorseval, and I never teach them. And the reason I never teach them is because it's actually easier to teach someone to have like the proper proper build and equipment and whatever than it is to teach everybody to do the updrafts, because you can hit the DPS check way faster than getting everyone to do the updrafts correctly.
From my perspective on that same point is that now that I've like done the raids a couple times and I take new people in or whatever, I always teach them to do the updrafts because I think it's more fun.
Oh yeah.
Well,
You're
it
an
is
updraft fan?
fun, but if those so the unfortunate thing is it is fun, but if you take those people and they're like, yeah, I've learned the boss, I am now going to go into the LFG and
True.
they're gonna go into a pug group and they're gonna be making their way toward the wall and everyone else is gonna phase the thing.
Yeah.
It's gonna be really
Yeah.
awkward.
Yeah, maybe what you do in that case is just like you teach them the wrong way that because it's more fun or the wrong way, and then like after the fight, you be like, oh yeah, by the way, we didn't have to do that. Just hit the boss really hard.
Yeah, I think it's important to like mention that it is a thing. Sometimes they'll say, "Hey, the updrafts exist, but they're like completely unnecessary due to power creep and your ability to phase the boss faster." And then I just say, "We're not going to do that because we don't need to." So here you go.
Yeah, fair.
I think it's a good bit of knowledge to have. Like, you want to know how it works, even if you don't necessarily play it out that way, right? I think, that's still relevant. I think that's still pretty interesting.
Because I do play with a lot of players that have tried to get into training before, and we brought them into our blind groups. So obviously we don't know the mechanics. We're going to figure it out on the fly. And so when they're figuring it out on the fly, they have a lot of fun doing that because they're learning the mechanics. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that's how this worked. Oh, I didn't know this worked. I was just told to hit really hard. And this is not like something that I think is like you're doing something wrong, Snab. It's more just like I think players can enjoy doing the game in different ways. Some people are very reward oriented, where they have fun just from getting the kill, and I think a lot of players are also very oriented in a way that's like, I want to learn the mechanics, and that's the fun part of it for me. If I didn't have to get the legendary armor, or if I wasn't streaming, I would kill each raid once, and then I'd never touch it again because I'm like, oh, that was neat. On to the next one.
It's quite interesting because I 100% agree. I think having all of the context and that foundational knowledge allows you to execute some of these skips a lot better, and it allows you to overcome obstacles better as well. Because if some kind of mistake happens or somebody can't cover the mechanic for whatever reason, now you can. You are aware constantly of what's going on around you. That said, I actually really want to know what you think about this. What do you think about training culture in Guild Wars 2? It's always been of my opinion that we have a big issue in the community with a reliance on veteran players teaching you how to do the content. Because I think it's really nice and it's exceptionally good to have an experienced player sort of guiding you through and telling you everything that's going on. It is an inherent advantage, in fact, to have a commander that knows what's going on. But relying on that and basically us telling people that, hey, you can't really play unless you're in a training, which means that you have to wait around until someone else decides that by their good faith, they're going to bring you into their group. I think that's messed up. I think that's really wrong. It just means that so many people feel more gate kept out of the content than they ought to be. And it's why I like to put a huge emphasis on progression groups. And it's why I really admire you for doing the blind group, because one, it's really hard to find people at this stage in the game's life that are going in totally blind. But two, just anyone that has the capacity to go, hey, I'm willing to fail a lot here so that I learn something. I think that says a lot about the people in the group. That means that they are not going to get toxic with each other, that they're going to go, okay, like we got to solve this problem. We don't know what the solution is. Let's figure it out together.
We're going to get toxic with each other, but it's like, it's in the sense to where like, okay, it was the heat of the moment. You go back there and you say, hey man, I'm sorry. Like it's a level of maturity, right? Like everyone under the heat of pressure. Like I had one of my friends from Final Fantasy actually with us last raid on Doom, and he ran out during the ritual, and this was our second time seeing it, so I understood that he was going to take huge tipping damage if he ran out earlier, and like he was going to like put us on the timer, and everyone had to like go out now, and I was like panicking. I was like, hey, got real pissed at him for a second for doing that because it almost wiped us. And I didn't want to do that fight again because I was already streaming for 9 hours. But I do think in general, most of the fights, at least wing 1 through 4, are easy enough to where anyone can go into them and have a good time. And all that you need is an understanding of how the boons work. I do think boons are a little bit awful And I kind of wish things like concentration didn't exist because it does feel like on some classes you need it, and then on healers you absolutely do, or something like that. At least that's my experience so far. Is that I was talking to people like DD quick, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I don't need any concentration. I just put this up, and then I have like full damage uptime, no loss." And then I think about like my H brand. If I want to bring in protection, I want to bring quickness, I need to have a certain level of concentration to keep it up 100% time, from
This
my
is a somewhat
understanding.
new thing, but
Is it okay?
it's just that the recent balance has sort of tipped a few classes in the favor of, hey, we can actually upkeep the boons with no concentration, and then some require heavy investment. I think if you went back a few years, there was more investment in concentration, and so your offensive support roles were actually doing significantly less damage. But now you've got things like Quick Herald that are just blasting damage and providing a whole bunch of boons. So it's fairly balanced, sensitive that way. Oh, just real quick, I do want to say what I was saying before with progression. I wasn't saying pickup groups are better. What I was trying to say is encouraging people to go into progression groups is better.
100%.
So
well, I want to
yeah.
actually clarify further. Sneb is saying that it is not sustainable for a community to be this reliant on other
On experienced
people,
players.
essentially, being completely reliant on experienced players, essentially carrying new players, right? I think it's a great thing to do that, and so does Sneb.
Yeah.
Hell, that's what Sneb does, right? At the
Yeah.
end of the day, right? That's what we all do. A lot of streamers do this, right? We are obviously all in favor of this, but it is not sustainable. It results to crazy burnout, right, in the veteran community, and there's just simply not enough to go around. Like, the supply-demand equation doesn't work. There are way too many people and nowhere near enough people who have the knowledge and have the experience level to be able to teach all of the players all of this stuff. It is non-viable. It is not viable to have the only entry point for instance content be having someone with you there who's already done it. That is non-viable if you want to have a healthy and sustainable community.
It's weird to even think that that's a thing, right? Because it's saying that the only okay, it may be a bit of a perception thing, but I think that the community is at fault for this, partly because we perpetuate it. We say, well, you can't really go into a group unless you know what you're doing first. So you have to get training, which is just blasphemy, because literally all you have to do if you really want to raid is you got to find 9 other people who are willing to allow you to fail. That's it. Now, that's not easy because of the systems that we find ourselves in Guild Wars 2, but there are communities and guilds and whatever that exist that allow you to do that. But by going and telling people you can't play unless you find a trainer, you're now making them go and jump through all of these hoops. They'll look in the LFG. There's nothing ever in training, or not, that's hyperbole, but there's very rarely things in training.
You'll see like 4
all
a
in these
day.
private discords, and the private discords all up to the trainer's schedule. That schedule might not work for you, but guess what? There's probably 9 other people it doesn't work for either. And those 9 other people are probably willing to allow you to fail. But by constantly saying, oh, you have to get training, you have to get training, you have to get training, we're just saying it's not okay if you fail. I actually think that's what it gets down to, is it's not okay if you fail. And that is stupid, because I fail all the time. Everyone is going to fail. Failure is a part of life. It's a part of learning. Yeah. The faster you fail, the better you get. And if you're in training and people are basically trying to make up for your mistakes all the time, you're actually not experiencing failure in the way that would probably be preferential to your learning experience.
Do you think?
100%.
Do you think the encounter? I just want to get in here before this actually passes, because this is super interesting, Seb. We kind of touched on this before, but I'm really interested in this. Do you think this is part of the encounter design in Guild Wars 2 actually kind of enables this? Because almost all fights in Guild Wars 2 raids are basically 2 to 3 people do every mechanic and 7 people do literally nothing.
Yeah, I absolutely. You know, I always say stuff like
100%.
People have criticized me for a lot for this, but I say I don't really think it's worth doing training on the EOD strike CMs. And they're always like, what? I go, well, I mean, it's not really a training. It's me reading the wiki to you and then you just failing a bunch of times, which you could do in a progression group. You don't really need me there. It's nice to have a leader. It's nice to have somebody kind of pointing out what your mistakes are and trying to direct you where to go. But for the most part, I could kind of nudge you in the right direction, and then let you go in a progression group and then read your logs and tell you what to do. You don't need me to be there per se. It's helpful maybe to have me there, but I like when the stress of the mechanics is kind of more equally applied to everyone in the group, it forces you to do progression. You have to fail. And I think it's very true. A lot of the earlier raids, especially 1, 2, 3, 4 in particular, you can put all the pressure on like 3 or 4 people, and then everyone else just kind of does whatever, and you'll probably get through the fight.
Yeah.
And so this has enabled people to say, oh, well, you're not good enough. You're not ready for this. I'm just going to kind of carry you through. And then, after a few times you didn't, then maybe it's okay if you do it. I think we're infantilizing people. I think people are capable of much more than they think they are. And that they have so much more potential than is realized oftentimes, because we keep them in this little box and we say that they can't do it without us. It's a huge issue in the Guild Wars 2 community. It's part of the reason I haven't been doing a lot of trainings lately. It's because I don't really like doing it. I actually feel like I'm holding people back. When people have asked me recently for trainings, I've actually said, let's get you on a team. Let's get you in a progression group. Let's try to get you in a position where you're going to fail hard, you're going to fail fast, and you're going to do really well. Again, not saying it's easy to do any of that, not saying that that's for everyone or anything like that, but I think it's much better than telling people they can't do something until they get in the queue and wait for me.
Yeah. I think if tomorrow ArenaNet changed the LFG to where what is now training just said progression, and what is now experience just said cleared, I think that would be a very big positive for it overall. You said, "Ooh," is
no, I completely agree. Yeah, I think I think with where I would go even further, I think it should be verifiable, right? I think you should be able to see, you should be able to communicate.
Yes.
And actually, I think it'd actually be the other way around. I think you should be able to communicate to someone that you have cleared it, right? In a good way, because kill proof, you can kind of do that, but it's not that good, really.
Kill proof is awful. Like, I delete every kill proof I get.
It's just not. It's just not a very good system, to be honest, right? I think you should.
It's not a system.
You should be very easily able to communicate your experience level to other players. Like this, 100% needs to be like a thing in the future, for sure. I think so.
Even just showing that you've cleared. That is all that you need for the most part. Obviously, there are going to be people who have 1,000 KP versus someone with 1 KP. And something like a raid route could be involved. But do the raids really necessitate that? If you're going for a quick speed run kill, sure, you want people there with 1,000 KP. You're probably already meeting on Discord for those very quick speed run kills. For your weekly kill, 1 through 7, I'm
not gonna lie. The reason why people do that. Okay, do you want to know the actual meme reason why people do that? People do that to basically scare people away, almost. Okay,
because I've done that before too.
If you put a group that is like, oh yeah, just be EXP. The problem is you get people who will try to take advantage of you, and okay, that's me being cynical.
I'm being charitable here.
Charitably speaking, people interpret that statement as in like, experienced is I've seen the boss before, right? As in like I haven't killed it, but I've seen it, right? Or I've killed it once.
It's not defined enough.
Yeah.
Have you seen the LFG on Final Fantasy? Because I think it's one that is in between WoW and Guild Wars, right?
I haven't seen it. Explain it.
Okay. So here's how it works. There's 3 different ways that you can list your group for a raid. You have one that is learning the fight. It is just called practice. You have the second one, which is called duty complete. This is mean that you're looking, or duty completion. This means that you're looking to complete the duty, the instance that you're on. Then you have a third one that can only be queued if you killed the boss. That's just called duty completed. So you have 3 tiers there. People who are learning the very base of the fight. Typically, you see groups that went in there for the very first time. You might have someone that comes in and is like, hey, I'm experienced. You guys want to know things? And that's a really strong part of that community. It's because like they'll come in and ask typically firsthand before like they just go off explaining everything. Because someone might be trying to like blind prog it or do this and that. Typically, they'll define if they're trying to blind prog. And then as well as that, like for the duty completion, people are coming there at least seeing like up to 20% up to the in rate of the fight, something like that. That's the expectation. People still scum it because you can't check for that. Like, where was your last log? But it's pretty quick to tell, like, if you're wiping at like 10% on a boss, or like 10% into a boss, as opposed to getting to in rage. And then for the duty completion, obviously you get some shitters in there every once in a while, but it's mostly fine for your weekly reclear.
This is so funny because without playing Final Fantasy, I had a suggestion that's very similar to this a long time, and I've reiterated this a million times. I'll do it again very quickly. Right now, LFG really problematic by saying training experienced, too dichotomous. It's basically saying, hey, you've never held a sword before versus like, the Giga Chad who's killed Doom 100 times. You're just there's like a way too big of a gap there. So I think training should be scratched because training also implies that somebody experienced must be there, and I think that's problematic. So I would put it just practice. I change it to practice and emphasize that it's just about going in and learning the fights. And then I wouldn't allow people to even look inexperienced unless they've killed the boss, like killed a raid boss, a single raid boss.
That's really fair.
And the reason for this is because it protects them. It prevents them from having negative experiences. If you go into practice, expectations are aligned because, hey, you may never kill the boss before. I may never kill the boss before. We're going to go in and we're going to do our best. We're going to learn something along the way. You go into experience when you've never killed the boss before and you don't say anything. Now you have a recipe for disaster because you have really incongruent expectations. And so I would rather prevent people from seeing that and allowing them in sort of an area where they can grow and flourish than it being like totally open field. And the thing is, this already exists. This is Fractals, right? Fractals has this exact same setup. So I don't think it's anything that's obscene to consider in Guild Wars 2. I think it just makes sense. Why would you set people up for failure? I hate that.
I agree.
I don't think it makes any sense to do that. I would much rather see people be set up for success. So that's what I would do.
I do think in a lot of ways, I experienced this effect of being set up for failure. In my first ever time I went to Reclear Wing 1, I didn't have my full group with me. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go farm out the spirit thread for my legendary armor, right? I was like, I've killed the boss. Let me throw myself into experienced. We wipe once because someone messes something up. Half the group leaves. Sick. Everyone in the stream's like, Reed, why aren't you in training? Why aren't you in training? Why aren't you in training? It's like, if you're gonna make a mistake, why aren't you in training? I'm like, I thought this was experience, not like expert or something like that, right? It's like, it doesn't make sense. Like the just looking at it, right? Coming from fresh eyes, never being part of the community before that, it doesn't make sense. And then I put a group up in training, or I joined a group on training rather, and the guy is talking through every single mechanic. I'm like, okay, well, I've already cleared before. I'm just going to do my own thing. I know how to do these bosses. I've tanked them before. I've done this before. It's not that big of a deal. And then I didn't do one specific thing that he asked me to do, and he was like, you idiot, you absolute moron, airhead, not listening to a thing I said. I was just like, leave? I'm not going to deal with that. What the hell? I'm going to make my own group. So it wasn't the best representation for those two, and I think the LFG is a major problem with the game because the community is sick. The raids are good enough. They just don't do a good job of marketing it.
Yeah.
It's hard. I've always said this. It's the hardest part about raids or any instance content in Guild Wars 2 is finding people who are willing to allow you to fail. That's it.
Yeah.
Just finding other people to play with. And we can meme and we can say, oh, you just put the group up in the LFG. That's fine, but it's hard to find people that have the similar expectations. You just complicate it. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that the game does not do a very good job of... I don't think there is a very good idea of what it means to be prepared for a lot of this content. I think, in my personal opinion, players tend to focus on completely the wrong things. Players tend to focus on the mechanics of the encounter rather than the mechanics of how good they are at playing their build. And in my opinion, that is a huge mistake. If you go in and you're very confident in playing your build, and you build a setup, you've been practicing a little bit in open world, you know what all your buttons do, you're confident with movement, you aren't skill clicking, you have good keybinds, right? Like you could attack while moving. If you do that, you will annihilate these fights. And I can prove it as well. I actually had a new group, like a progression team that I was training and leading recently. And we one-shot a bunch of very hard bosses, including Samrock Challenge Mode, which is actually rather surprising to me. We one-shot it because I just forced them to practice attacking while moving. And do you know what I find really frustrating about this? And I know this is true. People don't believe me when I say this. And I don't know how to communicate that I'm being serious and it's not a joke. It's 100% true. When I say, guys, if you want to blast Guild Wars 2, the most important skill is you need to be able to use your abilities without looking at your skill bar. You need to be able to attack while moving, and you need to be able to know what all of your buttons do and know how your build works, right? And people don't believe me when I say that. And I know they don't, because if they did, they would probably do it, right? They would actually do it.
But it
right.
makes sense why. And again, bingo, because I always mention it. It just makes sense because they think they're prepared because the game has told them that they're prepared throughout their entire journey thus far. So they don't think that they need to do much more than that because it's always been sufficient. So we can question that all we want, but it really comes down to, hey, the exposure that they've had to the game has suggested that they are prepared. And so going in and just doing the mechanics has always been enough. In fact, not even doing the mechanics at all has been enough for a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
Not even knowing what the mechanics are has given them a gold medal. So it's really challenging for a player to suddenly be slapped with, whoa, what you're doing is not enough, because whatever they've been doing so far has always been enough. I think this stark jump just constantly creates conflict and problems for people that are trying to get into this stuff. Not to mention that it's already difficult to know what to do in Guild Wars 2 because you hit level 80. That's why people always ask. They're like, I just hit level 80, I have no idea what to do. Or they use the boost and they're like, wait, what am I supposed to do now? Like, where do I go? What should my next goal be? They don't really have really much to think about, I guess. That they're not really sure what the next step is because there's just so many options. They know that a bunch of options exist, but they're not sure if there's any sort of linear path to this. And there's not. You could go to raids, you could go to fractals, you could start working on gear, you could work on other builds, you get elite specializations. And as content creators, we're often asked these questions. Well, where do I begin? And guess what? Everyone has a different opinion because everyone likes different kinds of content and feels that the most fun way to do X, Y, and Z is to do it in this way. And so no one ever gets any straight answers either. I can imagine that it is very difficult for a lot of players who like sort of that linear path that, okay, well, now I do step A and then I do step B and then I go to this zone and then go to that just doesn't really quite exist in the same way in Guild Wars 2.
I think there's something to be said with the fact that I think all three of us, Teapot, I don't know entirely for you, but I think the majority of us are very instance-minded, right? Like, that's our favorite kind of content in most games, right? And so when we're saying there's like no set path, some people will absolutely love that. They'll find it completely freeing and it'll allow them to do anything and it feels great. For us, it's just like, man, I wish we could get more people into raids and do these kinds of things that are very, very fun and it can be challenging and can be fun to learn and can teach people to kind of feel confident in their own abilities. But because it's so free, they've never been given like a container to keep like themselves like moving forward, learning, experiencing new things. They can just kind of go out and farm winter berries, and that's progression for them because their damage is going up off of the accessories. But they're learning nothing. They're gaining nothing. They're just making a new character, picking up some berries, and that's some content. And it's fine for that to exist. I think it's a great thing for it to exist. But it does not align with the way I think the majority of us, or in this call right now, would think about our gameplay, right? It's just going to be very, very divergent.
The whole beauty of this, though, is that Guild Wars 2 is so open that it gives you options. And I love that about Guild Wars 2. So I'm hesitant. I don't want to sit here and critique and complain about that because I actually think it's amazing.
It's great.
It does, however, have some drawbacks, which are that people generally don't know where to go or what to do. And that's tough. I don't know how you solve that while still preserving sort of this this open beauty that we have, right?
Yeah, and I hate when people like always tell people when they're first getting into the game, like, go out and do POF, get your mounts, do this, do that. I'm like, if you're getting new into the game, right? Don't worry about anything. You're probably fine with a core build to just like play the game, go through the story, something like that. Experience HOT. HOT is pretty sick. The story's not the best in every part, but you know what? It's a fun time to go through those maps. Get the glider. Then you get that like progression of your character that's like getting the Springer for the first time. You're like, oh, Pog. Now I can like do that little bug or whatever it is where you can jump off the Springer in midair, do a glider, get to places where the skimmer can only go. I don't know. I had a lot of fun just doing that kind of stuff. And there's not a lot of other MMOs in the market that have such a freedom, especially with the way that you traverse the world. And that freedom is also inherently going to harm instance content, because instance content is something that should be in a degree refined, right? Final Fantasy has very strong instance content because the game, every single class has like maximum 2 to 3 builds except for Black Mage. So it's just like you already know what you're doing. Everyone has the same buttons on your screen. A red mage is a red mage is a red mage. They have all the same like 24, 26 buttons that they gotta press. They have probably the same exact stat line. The only difference is like, oh, this one has a little bit higher number.
Oh yeah, this is definitely one of the biggest issues with Guild Wars 2. Like in a lot of these other games, it's very hard to make bad choices. In Guild Wars 2, it's very easy to make bad choices.
Very, very easy.
And the issue is that for most of the game, those choices don't matter at all. And that means the game doesn't really give you any feedback. I mean, look, I recently beat Dragon's End with no gear on and no stats whatsoever. This is considered to be the hardest open world event by far in terms of the DPS check. And I beat it with no gear. I had 0 stats whatsoever. I had no accessories, no armor, and my weapon did not have any attributes on it whatsoever. So, yeah, your choices just aren't really that important a lot of the time. But even saying that is very dangerous because that isn't true, by the way. Okay,
Isn't entirely congruent.
It's only true if other people around you are kind of paying attention. Like realistically, most open world meta events, it's carried by a few people who do a lot of damage, and then everyone else doesn't really do anything. Like that's just the nature of oh, yeah, to be clear, it was the entire squad doing that. Like, everyone had no gear. Like, I thought that was maybe apparent from context, but yeah, it was everyone had no gear. It was literally everyone.
What's the DPS check now for Dragon's End? Like, what does the average DPS require
like
now?
5K.
5K, so they brought it down 1,000 for everyone? Okay.
Well, okay, I let me, because people are going to debate me. I did the math. It is approximately 5K per person if all 60 people are actually participating actively.
You do
now,
like 8K DPS without gear?
Yeah, so you have to, if you have to assume that like 25% of your group is probably not going to be doing anything. They might be AFK, they might not be there or whatever. So if you do that and you say, hey, we've got 40, the other thing with Dragon's End is that the map has a hard cap of 60 people in it. So you can assume that you can have 45 people. If all 45 people are there, it's probably more like 8K, right? Yeah. So if each player is doing about 8K, then you'll do really, really well.
Yeah. And I think it's really difficult for players to determine how well they're doing, right? Because of that. Because everything in the open world is very, very easy. And everything in the story is... In fact, there are some instances in the story where you actually cannot lose. The game will just revive you if you die, and the boss doesn't regenerate.
Oh, I know.
It will not let you lose. So there's not a lot of feedback there with players. And yeah, for sure, like the game being very open and free like this, it's actually really cool. But the problem is that you're absolutely right. Instance content necessarily has constraints on the player. It's going to say, okay, you need to do this much damage. You need to have this much healing, right? That's kind of a necessary part of it. Because you can't have a challenge if you don't, like, essentially create some hoops for the player to jump through. That's the nature of it, right? Like, you can't get around that. If you want something to be challenging, you want something to be difficult, then you're going to have to say, right, listen, buddy, you've got to do this. Otherwise, you lose. Haha. That's part of it. And that's obviously like a big step up. Like the rest of the game isn't really like that. It doesn't really go that way. And that's why a lot of frustration happened with Dragon's End, because it was the first time something in open world kind of really asked you to do that, especially when it comes to damage. There have been a few tough open world bosses that have actually had some mechanics, like one from the core game, Triple Trouble Worm, is, I would say, like, it's mechanically way harder than Dragon's End. It's just that the DPS check is very low. And this is something that is interesting. Players, and I think, by the way, I'm curious what you gamers think of this. I think this is why ArenaNet are designing strikes and fractals like they are now. ArenaNet are moving the difficulty of the game away from button pressing and a bit more towards fight mechanics. And I think this is a big part of this. Strike missions right now, if you do the mechanics, you will get there in the end, right? Pretty much. It might take you a long time, but you will get there. And in a way, this kind of makes them inherently more accessible because your button pressing is less relevant. It's more like you just need to understand how the fight works and then you'll win. And by the way, gamers, this is kind of how it is in other MMOs. And I think it's like that for a reason. Like a lot of other MMOs do this. It's only on the very high difficulty settings where mechanics become relevant. Because before all the Guild Wars 2 ego, people say, ha, I knew WoW and Final Fantasy were easy and Guild Wars 2 is the mechanically skilled game. Oh no, don't worry. They'll ask you to be good mechanically, but it will be on the hard difficulty. On the easy difficulty, they won't ask you to have good game mechanics. You just need to understand the fight. But when you get to the high difficulties, yes, they are going to expect you to have really good mechanical skill in these games as well. But yeah.
You know, I know we're probably coming sort of to the end of the show, so to speak, but we've talked a lot about a variety of things, right? Some the good, the bad. I think we've sort of leaned more heavy towards critiquing some of the things of the game or comparing it to Final Fantasy World of Warcraft. I just really want to know what you love about the game. Like what has kept you playing? Because a lot of people might try Guild Wars 2 and go, no, not for me. I kind of prefer X, Y, or Z. But you kind of stuck with it. I mean, you've been going through all the raids. What is it that you absolutely love about Guild Wars 2 that maybe you're not getting elsewhere? Or
So, like we kind of touched upon, it is a large part to do with that level of freedom, and especially with the map content. Because I don't really consider myself like an average like casual player. Like I've come from Hall of Fame World of Warcraft raiding. I've done ultimates in Final Fantasy, and I've like even written guides for like week 1 content in those games, right? Not guides, but I've done like diagrams with them. And for me, when I played through Guild Wars 2, it was like connecting well enough. You know, I had some friends to play around with, and that's good enough. They were like saying, like, look at the raptor animations. I'm like, oh yeah, those are pretty good. I like the momentum on them. The movement feels good. And then I got to the Gendaran fields, and I was just going around doing my hearts. Don't love the system of the hearts, but it was fine. And I went to a point of interest that was right next to a mountain, and then I walked through that mountain, and then I went into an airship, and it's called like, what's it called? Not So Secret. I love that. It was so cool. And like, you know, I don't really think of myself as like a JP gamer, right? I'm not really like a jumping puzzle enthusiast, but I really enjoy the jumping puzzles in this game because they're just like little hidden nooks and crannies of the games that you can just kind of find and do and have a good time. And it's not like a very competitive thing, but there is a kind of failure and a kind of success state. And you're not like time gated in any kind of significant way. You're just kind of having a good time figuring it out. It's a little personal puzzle in the same way that like the Queen's Gauntlet is a little personal puzzle. I think the game does a really good job of maybe not serving up the most difficult or challenging content, but constantly just kind of changing things up enough to make you think about what you're doing. When I go into World of Warcraft, most of the open world content is fly around and kill rares. That's not fun. It's like if you just did the Dragonfall meta every single day for the rest of your life for 5, 6, 7 expansions. Exactly. And just killed those champions at the end. It's awful. It's not a good time. Sometimes they do nice little secrets. Argus had a lot of those back in 7.3. And it's kind of the same thing for Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy has the worst open world in all MMOs, easily. And it's not its focus. Its focus is story and instance content. Just like Guild Wars 2 is maps and kind of this exploration and this freedom that you feel. They do the best in the market on those aspects, for sure. Yes. And the momentum is sick.
Yeah.
Love Griffin riding.
Yeah.
I
the
think
Griffin riding. Have you got the beetle? The beetle is big. You gotta get the beetle. You gotta get the beetle, man.
The beetle.
Yeah, that's coming up. That's coming up. I want to get my Sky Scale on the beetle before the expansion launch. But there's a lot to do. I got a lot of content on my plate.
I think you can kind of tell when you're going around the open world and you run into things like Not So Secret, or there's some little audio interaction between some NPCs, or there's a random little event that doesn't serve like a ton of purpose other than maybe some achievement. You can tell that there's a lot of artistry and joy dumped into those little things that whenever I run into that, I think that some devs somewhere while they were making it, they cracked a little bit of a smile, right? They're like, oh yeah, somebody's going to stumble upon this at some point and think it's kind of neat. And I do agree that that's a really fun element of Guild Wars 2. I'm curious what the easiest thing for you to sort of adopt or learn in Guild Wars 2 was, and what the hardest thing was relative to other MMOs.
The easiest thing, I mean, it's just doing like a DPS rotation, right? It's the same no matter what. Like, people ask me oftentimes, I think like Kiyoshi asked me the other day, like, how does it compare in Guild Wars 2 to play a game with like 5, 10 buttons compared to like something like WoW or Final Fantasy that can have like up to 36, right? Well, it's not really 5 to 10 buttons because you have like the 5 to 10 buttons. Plus, if you want to count swapping the weapon around, that's a 11th button. Plus, you have like at least 3 to like 6 options up the top with the F1 to whatever abilities. And then like on something like Healbrand, oh, don't even get me started how many buttons that is. Like another 15 on top of that you gotta learn. Plus all the utilities. You have 5 equipped, and maybe you'll just learn those 5. And then like you have so many more to learn on top of that. So if you compare it to a game like Final Fantasy, where if I'm playing Paladin in Final Fantasy, I have 36 buttons, but I only need to learn those 36 buttons. To be fair, in most encounters, I will use those 36 buttons on very challenging encounters, save for something like cover or stun. But I'll use like the other 34. But in Guild Wars 2, you can learn a lot and invest a lot in knowing for niche situations. That does feel good. And it's not too different from other MMOs. As for the hardest thing for me to learn, it's just figuring out like the achievements tab and the UI. It's like there's no quests telling me what to do. It's like, where's my big green bubble that tells me go here, go there? Like, you have it on the MSQ, and then I'm trying to do my Griffin, and I'm like, okay, what is this like event that I need to wait for? When does it come up? Oh, I don't know. I need to type in /wiki. It's like it can get really hard for me to adapt to that, because in most other games, like Final Fantasy and like WoW for specifically, you can just kind of like do it. It's right in front of you. You do it. Maybe tops, you wait 2 minutes. But that was something very interesting to adapt to. And then like LFG on that UI front as well, which I understand that stuff.
Cool.
Okay.
Teapot, do you have any other questions?
I was going to say, what's something you really don't like about the game?
I was trying to keep it positive.
What is trash? Flame the game. What's bad? What sucks? He's
Berry
just gonna say
farming.
the LFG. Berry farming.
And the LFG.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the mental around the community that is typically like very GPM, gold per minute centric. I know you do a big series on it, and obviously it's content that you enjoy, or else you wouldn't be doing it. But for me, I'm very much, I want novelty to my experiences. I don't want to be farming something over and over again. And the game is very much something that is designated towards that, because you can transfer gold to gems. It's the same thing that happened to WoW whenever they introduced the WoW token. People became a lot more interested in how they could make gold fast, right?
Yeah.
I think that is a somewhat of a negative on the MMO, but I do love that the community is very supportive of ArenaNet and saying like, oh yeah, I buy like 10 Black Lion keys a month or something like that. And it's like me paying the sub. Like, great. Pay their bills. I like playing their game. I'll pay them some too. I like that skin.
Yeah.
I want a fishing rod.
Bad
Yeah,
that
get
I'd
the
rather
fishing
just
rod skin.
give them the money than buy the keys. But anyway,
Yeah, that should just be a donation button. Yeah. Sneb
Gotta
loves
gamble.
loot boxes. Sneb, he loves them. He loves them so much.
Love the Gamba.
He
love the
loves it.
Gamba.
He loves it, guys. He's all over it, right?
yeah,
He swipes
I'm
for
going
that.
to say this, and then we're not going to talk about it because I'll go off about it. But
Oh, wow.
I would like everyone to notice that when you pre-ordered Secrets of the Obscure, that if you got the Ultimate Edition, you got 4,000 gems, and then very shortly thereafter there was a sale on keys, and I would like to note that is quite interesting, and that's all I'll say.
Wow.
Listen,
When do you get those keys?
if someone's gonna spend the money on it, good for them. Good for ArenaNet. Good for the people who are doing it. I do think there's probably something wrong with loot boxes as a whole, but it could be worse.
It could be
like,
worse.
I played a lot of Smite, and that game has
That's
that
the
game
best
has
you're gonna get. in the modern gaming industry, like it could be worse. That's
It could be worse.
Yeah, that's the best you're gonna get.
Yeah. I played a lot of Smite, and that game has massive amounts of cosmetics tied to loot boxes. And I remembered when they made it to where like limited skins that only came out for a short amount of time period were available for like hundreds of dollars. And I remember people being up in flames. My take on that is like, hey, if you want to whale, go ahead. It's pixels on a screen. I care about like mechanical depth more so than anything. I do think loot boxes can be a bit toxic for some obvious reasons, but it's gaming. It's gaming, boys.
It's gaming in 2023.
Yep. Thank you, Blizzard, for loot boxes.
Yeah, it's not ideal. Okay, honestly, it's the loot boxes. They're here. They're here to stay. They're here forever, unfortunately. But anyway, I guess that'll about do it. Do you have any final comments? I think it's only fitting that you have the last word on this conversation, ReelyReed. Do you have any thoughts that you wish to share with us that you don't think have been covered during this conversation? Any topics or ideas that you wish to bring up before we wrap things up?
I said they should add more bad bosses, so I think I got my most controversial takes kind of taken care of.
For the YouTube comments.
I wanted to comment on that because you know what? I think I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying with this. Content, the amount of content you release trumps almost everything. Like, for example...
It doesn't have to be good.
Yeah, so even when it doesn't have to be bad either, though. I think a really good example is, I would encourage everyone to think about this. Back in Heart of Thorns, guys, during like the season 3 period, the balance of the game was dog shit. The communication was non-existent. The LFG sucked. Like a lot of the problems that exist in the game now were arguably worse back then. But you know what? Nobody fucking cared because they released a lot of content. It is what it is. It is what it is. Like it's only when you don't have content, when you have a content void, when you're waiting 3 years for a fractal, when you're waiting 4 years for a raid, 5 years for a raid, actually, at this point, right? Like, it's only then when people get their magnifying glasses out and say, you know what, ArenaNet? This is stupid. And you know what? The game is dog shit because of this small issue that was irrelevant when there was content. Like, I know what you're saying when you say that. I think some people are gonna misinterpret what you're saying there. I think,
whatever.
but I do understand. I was actually meaning to agree with you actually, but I forgot to do it because I do think in all these games, content is king, and that's again been very apparent when I look at other MMOs. Is that some of the content. It's kind of shit, but there's just a lot of it, right? Like, it's just there, right? Like, players have got something to do. They've got something to occupy themselves, right? Because, again,
it so bad.
Yeah, I think a lot of MMOs, again, we talked about this kind of meta element as well. Like, even if you're playing essentially dog shit content or content that's maybe not optimal or not perfect, it doesn't matter. You're playing it with the gang. You're playing it with the crew, right? You've got your community. You're having your social experience. And I think that can take something that's like, this content's pretty whatever, right? And turn it into something a lot more than that, to be honest. And that's not to say that devs just make, bad content. I'm not saying these other games do. I think, certainly in my experience of playing WoW, I actually really like the content. I think it's really good.
Sweet summer child.
Yeah. Oh, look, dude. I'm a Mythic Plus enjoyer. What could I say? It's pretty good.
It's all good. We all are at one point.
And I think a lot of the stuff in Guild Wars 2 has, right? Like, when Guild Wars 2 is blasting out all these, blasting out all this content, everyone was pretty happy, right? It's only when it didn't really work out, and it turns out that at the end of the day, raids are just not financially viable. But
makes sense.
Yeah, it's if I read that things started to turn towards the doom. And now, it's weird. You're arriving at such an unusual point in the game's history because everyone's big mad. You actually might be witnessing. This is so weird to me. And this is a great bombshell to end on. You might be just in time to witness the actual implosion of the raid scene. Of like, for real this time. I think that this fractal might actually be the final killing blow to the community.
I'm excited. I think, I've got a lot of content to do. I don't care if it's not the best, as long as it's there and I can get to do it with my buds. I played Borderlands 2. That game's not great. I had a good time playing with my friends.
Like we said earlier in the show, it's not necessarily all about what you're playing exactly, but more so about who you're with and the
Exactly.
relationships that you make. And at some point, that can become more valuable than really any of the content. That's not an excuse for content to be constant garbage or anything, right? Like you aspire to good content, but Killers 2 has a lot of good content, and
Really does.
especially if you're a new player jumping in, you got a lot to experience. I think you're gonna have a really, really good time, and that's quite exciting.
Yeah.
And so you're right. You got your buds there. You're gonna have a blast. I'm excited for you. And I've obviously been in your stream a little bit. I know Teapot's been in your stream a little bit. I really love seeing just the pure joy that you get to have when you're experiencing a lot of this stuff for the first time, and in many cases blind. So I think it's been quite a privilege to have you in the community. I'm excited that you're here.
I'm very excited to start things like Wing 6, Wing 7. I heard a lot of good things, and I'm excited to get EOD strikes, despite what Teapot says.
Oh, and I like the EOD strikes. No, man, I should have expressed this better. Like the EOD strikes, the EOD strikes,
they're really good.
They are aimed at me. They are probably the content in the game that targets me more than anything else. But I can also simultaneously recognize that that doesn't necessarily mean that it targets the rest of the community, right?
100%.
For sure, right? I'm obviously acutely aware of that being the case. So like, yeah, for me, they're awesome because they're hard, right? And I like them to be challenged. I like encounters that, punish you, right? And will, challenge you and force you to try and improve. But the thing is, not everyone likes the style of difficulty and the way that they're difficult, which I think is totally fair. I think that's a valid criticism. That's a valid opinion to have. I'm not going to give people a hard time for, for not liking this type of content because of the way it's being designed compared to how the old content is being done. That honestly, that's a topic for another time. I think at this stage because that could take a while to get into. We could be here all day. So we're gonna
another hour coming.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna kind of we'll tease you guys with the next episode, right? Like when we go back again.
It's a tough. I'll just say that I really like them too. I think they're more targeted toward Teapot than me, but I actually think the problem isn't necessarily with the strikes themselves so much. I mean, there are little issues here and there, but more so that there's not a lot of tools to help you again align and team up with people with similar goals, expectations, experience levels, and in my experience, I found it really difficult to find groups for them, or to get groups that stick together, or to get groups that have those similar expectations. And this problem just gets worse, it seems like. It's not impossible to find groups or anything like that. It's just more difficult because there's more pressure put on each individual player. And again, just a drawback of it being actually more engaging than a lot of the raids.
Anyway, I think that is a good time to wrap things up. So, gamers, thanks for watching. Okay, hope you enjoyed the show. Definitely leave some comments and watch all the other TeaTimes and tell us what you think. Because, I mean, why wouldn't you do that? And I want to say a big thank you to my wonderful guests today. We have got Snebzor, we have got ReelyReed, new Guild Wars 2 enthusiast, big streamer, blaster, NA, and actually, make sure to type !hosts in the chat. It will link everyone's channels. And of course, we now have some good time to, sell out a little bit. We've been talking about Guild Wars 2. Let's talk about ourselves for a bit. So, new gamer on the block. Up first, ReelyReed.
Putting a lot of pressure on me.
Tell us about yourself. Go.
Okay, so like I said, I do a lot of raiding content. I've been playing through the game in its entirety. I just finished up with the EOD story. I've got a lot of plans going up before SOTO. I'm planning to do a giveaway of at least 6 copies of the game coming up here before its release. And I'm planning to get a lot of goals kind of knocked out beforehand. That way I can kind of be a lot more educated when I come to these discussions with MightyTeapot and with the wonderful Snebzor. That's the kind of content plan there. I'm working on my YouTube channel, which is all my brand is under ReelyReed. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on TikTok. I'm going to try to be everywhere that I can because I haven't messed up enough yet. So I got to figure out where my ends meet.
There it
Fail hard,
is.
fail fast, boys.
Boom. We love to see it. So be sure to follow the streams. The link is going to be, of course, in the chat right now, in the description, and just all over the place. So make sure you follow ReelyReed. Really appreciate you hopping on board. It's always good to see some new faces, bringing some big energy. And just look at him there, okay? Just look at him. Look at the other guy here. You can't see his lower body because it's being swallowed by an anaconda right now. It's Sneb.
Knocking on the door.
Yeah. He's got nothing to say. Look at this kid. Unbelievable.
Wait, am I supposed to talk?
Yeah, you're supposed to. Yeah.
You're
What
the
are you
looking at me? Okay,
Yeah.
well, on
Yeah, what are
my
you-
Discord,
what are
you're
you
looking
doing?
at ReelyReed. So I'm sitting there. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, you can keep talking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
Oh.
see. Yeah. You can't trust Discord, man. Like, we're not necessarily oriented
I
in the same
wasn't looking at
direction.
the stream. I was looking at Discord.
Yeah.
I was like, you
Well,
keep
no, I'm not.
looking at
No, I mean,
ReelyReed.
I'm looking to the side
Teapot,
right
look
now.
up.
I'm not
Yeah,
looking
look
at.
up.
I'm not looking at anyone. Right. At this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's my turn. Okay, yeah. So I won't ever knock on Teapot's door if I get swallowed by an anaconda, but I may knock on ReelyReed's door.
Hmm.
You can find me on Twitter at Snebzor. You can find me on Discord and all the things by the same name, YouTube, etc. But what I'm most known for in the community is helping unite players into epic raid squads. So what we do is we help match people into time slots where they can raid and they can progress as teams. We have over 110 teams across both the NA and EU servers. We have 4 guilds, probably over 1,500 people in them. We'd love to have more. We'd love to have more people getting into endgame content. So if you're ever interested in getting into strikes, raids, and you want just some people to play with, because that's the most difficult part of getting into any of this stuff, then that's your haven. It's discord.gg/Skeingang, SKEINGANG. I'd love to see you there. Or if you're lost or confused, you can always DM me as well. So glad that we got to have ReelyReed on here too. Big ups to him for being willing to come on. I know it's a little bit scary, especially if it's your first time, and you will get obliterated by the YouTube comments. So brace yourself.
They'll
Really?
be nice. They're
I'm
going to be
happy.
very kind. They're
Will they
Sure.
be nice?
they
you know,
will.
they probably will be.
They will.
I
I mean, they're
rated
not
the raids
that
a 6 out of
unhinged.
10.
Yeah. It's
They're
a high
gonna call me
rating.
ReelyReed. Yeah.
Yeah, that probably will happen. They'll be confused. They're going to see.
Listen,
There'll be a bit of a double take on the title, for sure.
it's a stage name for her. It is my actual name for me.
Yeah.
So I think I win this. I deserve the branding.
Anyway, gamers, you're on this channel right now, so you should definitely leave a comment. Tell us what you think about this discussion. Let us know what you're thinking about Guild Wars 2 right now. Give us your thoughts. Follow the stream. Come watch the TeaTimes live. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow these gamers. You got to go check them out. They're making some great content, some legendary content there. And of course, follow all my social media. And I hope to see you next time. But until then, my friends, it's time for us to depart. Thank you for watching, gamers. I'll be back in a moment for the after show here on Twitch. But on YouTube, this is all you're getting. Take it easy, gamers. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.